continue with Ernie Allen and then with Michael Milham. Did I pronounce it right, Michael? Michael Milham?
Yes, perfect.
Lovely. Then I had Marco Camisani Calzolari. Is he here? Marco, are you here? Doesn't seem to be here.
Artificial intelligence and the new frontiers of digital governance. We are crossing a line quietly every day. For years, we asked machine to help us decide. And now we let them decide parts of reality for us. Access, priority. Delegated power.
Something is going on.
You hear me? Mario?
Hello?
Ernie?
Ecco Ernesto.
Wonderful.
We can hear you.
Now. Yes.
You let us know when we can start.
Now. We can start now, Mario. We have a message from Mario Cazzolari. Will be a video message. And the video message is from ITU, from the director of ITU that sent a message to us. Is to in your session.
Okay.
Sulina Abdullah.
Okay, so the two video messages, I would leave it for the last after the first round of round table that we have, so that then we can start again. We will have about 5 minutes each on the first round, 5 to 6 minutes each, and then we will hear the two messages, and then we will go back around the table to comment on those other messages and what everybody else has said.
Perfect.
Okay, are we ready to start?
Yeah, because now we have in the answer direct streaming from answer around Italy, and this is a very important opportunity. We start now. When you are prepared, we can start.
Lovely. So we can go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, everybody, welcome to the afternoon session of this meeting, which is dedicated to growing up with artificial intelligence and how would it be possible to make informed choices in a connected world. I think making informed choices is, of course, key, especially for children that are growing up and that do not have necessarily a direction. Is one of the underlying subjects that we've discussed in a previous meeting we had in Rome not too long ago in November, a meeting again organized by Professor Caffo. It was within the Vatican. It was under the auspices of the Pope and the Secretary of State. And Pope Leo received everybody. And the most important results, I would say, of that meeting was that every company that was participating ended up signing a document of commitment to work together to try to find solutions to these challenges. How can we proceed with artificial intelligence, but how can we protect also children? I am using a very strong word, but I don't hesitate to use it because that meeting in a way was historical, not just because Pope Leo received everybody, but because he received this document and because it was the first time that I know that activists, experts, professors, journalists, and companies, more importantly, from from Google to TikTok to Microsoft to Meta and to OpenAI and so on and so forth, all signed this commitment together. So it's something that I think is very important because it shows that when there is dialogue, there is the possibility of meeting in common places and trying to find a way forward. Of course, and the way forward is here. I mean, we are continuing the conversation and we hope to be continuing, of course, on and on. Of course, we have to be aware because signing something is not necessarily the most guaranteeing way of moving forward. I mean, it's a document, it was a general document. And there is something that really hit me over the past few days, which is that over the Super Bowl, which all of you know, it's the most watched event, television event in the United States. It's the final of the football championship. The most prized advertising spots are during Super Bowl. And I think that they set up a record because 14 spots of about 30 seconds each that were being paid for about $10 million each were by artificial intelligence companies. So there is a PR effort from them to explain that they are for the good, and there are certainly many, many things that are for the good, but they're talking to the world when they're talking to the Super Bowl, and they're also talking to children, and they talk generally and just very optimistically, all of them, including Anthropic, that is the most self-aware of the dangers that may lay ahead of us. So we need to be aware. We need to know that there is always a challenge ahead of us. I want to thank Professor Caffo for having organized this meeting and for keeping the conversation going. And with no further delay, Ernesto, I give the floor to you for a few words before we start with our panel.
Thank you, Mario. I am in Rome in this moment with some colleagues, some institution, and we discuss today about, in this Sefer Internet Day, about the future of children in the digital world. This morning, between many European and Italian institutions, we had Julie Imam Grant from Australia to make a wonderful speech about what happens in Australia now with the new legislation. And she say that to build Rome was necessary to spend many, many years and to build artificial intelligence strategy, we need the time. And in this case, I think it's a process that we started many years ago together with Mario and other friends, Johanna Rubinstein, Ernie Allen in particular, and others. And we tried to see what was necessary to do, because when we made the Pope Francis some years ago, it was quite more than 10 years ago, we spoke about the digital world for children. And in this case, we signed the Chart of Rome. That was a starting point, in this case with academia, institutions, and company together, to see what is necessary to do, is build a vision in which we can find ideas to propose to the institution and to the legislator. With the AI solution, we have to go faster, because the artificial intelligence is very, very, very facilitating many processes, but created to many, many, many problems. One important issue is that we, as you said before, we achieved with the Interconference when we presented to the Holy Father, the 13th of November, the document that signed a very important passage in which we have a commitment for the dignity of children and with the responsibility for all people to be part of this process. And in this case, the Holy Father was there to give the sense that the Holy See is committed. We will have other meetings with him in the next months to build the action which transform our position paper in a real document. In this call of action, in which we have an area of protection, and in this case, legislation had to be very important. We have to see which legislation can be the right legislation for us, education, and that is important for the empowerment of children. And we say to the family and parents and the school have to play a crucial role. And after we need ethical and transparent technology. The safety by design had to be in the AI system very clear. I see many companies that like to find solution. We have a very important collaboration now, for example, in California, between company and the legislator to see how can be possible to build something for the future of children that can be concrete and possible. I think this is an important area in which Europe play a crucial role because the Digital Service Act and the AI Act are very important legal aspect. We have to think about that artificial intelligence is not a marginal part of the life of children. We presented today a national research in which we saw that quite 80% of the children utilize, to small children, artificial intelligence instrument too. If in Italian legislation is not permitted, means that sometimes legislator decide something that is not concrete, not real. But in any case, children now utilize in many areas artificial intelligence instrument, in particular in the emotional area. And this is one issue that we can discuss after with the friends of the Mind Institute in New York that was present to the group in our meeting in November. And we met recently in New York. I think we have to see how, in this case, the intelligence had to be integrated in our life, but had to be the human part that can manage the situation. The topic is not marginal. Artificial intelligence is there. We have only to see how we can manage, how we can find a way in which we can find concrete solution to work, to establish relation with the use of the artificial intelligence that had to be guided by the humans in many ways. This is the one strong commitment that we like to share is to have a place where the best interest of the children and adolescents will be recognized. In this case, had to be solution by design. We have to ensure algorithm transparency and accountability. We have to strengthen mechanisms for prevention, reporting, and intervention. Integrate AI into listening and protection service as the service that utilize Telefono Azzurro and other helpline around the world. To promote continuous digital education. That means, in particular, in the south of the world, because we have to include people. We have not to be to exclude people with difficulties, with handicap. We have to build a stable alliance across public, private, and the sector. And this is one very crucial goal in which we are involved as we did in the last meeting, in particular in the last meeting in November. I think this is the way we have to work together, and this is the sense of the meeting of today. I thank all of you, Mario, to chair this session, to see what we can do concretely for the future of our children. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ernesto. So, uh, let me give a brief introduction to the panel. First of all, the title of our panel is Who is Online? Age Verification and New Frontiers of Digital Governance. We should rather move to artificial intelligence governance because it's clearly now dominating overall over everything. We have the pleasure of having with us Megan Garcia, who is a mother that lost her child to artificial intelligence. She will bring a testimony of a front line survivor of what has been an ordeal in dealing with artificial intelligence. We all talk about it. We make big numbers, politics. We need to do this, we need to do that. But then there is the actual human factor. Ernesto, you mentioned the human factor at the center of our equation. Humanism was defined and grew up in Italy and then expanded. So we feel very close to humanism and to the human being, and to have the human being at the center of the equation. And therefore, when there is a confusion between who is human and who is not human, and how those two entities deal with each other, then we do have an issue that Megan Garcia will address, because that is what happened to her child, Sewil, who committed suicide. We have with us Ernie Allen, old friend. Ernie, welcome, chair of We Protect. We have Michael Milhan, chief science officer of the Child Mind Institute. We have Joanna Rubinstein, WAF Global Coalition of Digital Safety. We have a few guests that are attending with us. They're not speakers. They will speak at the next at the next event, like John and Nancy. And then we will have, after this first round, I will talk probably a little bit more at length with Megan, because I think that she should frame the conversation that we will have. We will have a couple of videos, and then we'll come back for another round of the table after the videos and after everybody has spoken, so that we can all comment on each other. I would ask you, when we speak, to keep your intervention to 5-7 minutes, not more than that, so that we can keep our schedule and close promptly in 1 hour. We are starting 2 minutes ahead, so we have a little advantage. With no further delay, I will give the floor to Megan. Megan, welcome. I am particularly grateful for Megan to be here, because she was not feeling particularly well this morning. I received an email just a few minutes before we were starting. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to be on board. And then she made the effort to be here with us, because her mission is clearly stronger than some physical deficiencies that we may have every now and then. So Megan, thank you for being with us. But as I promised, feel free to leave the roundtable if you don't feel staying on once we are done with our conversation. If you can stay, we would be grateful and happy, of course. Megan, I would start with your story. Tell us. Good morning, Megan. We're all around the world. We are some in America. I'm in New York. Megan is in Florida. Megan, your son Sewil. Tell us who Sewil was. Who he was. A 14-year-old.
My name is Megan Garcia, and I'm a wife, a mother of three beautiful boys. I'm also a lawyer in Orlando, Florida. My son, Sewil Setzer III, was 14 years old when he died by suicide in our home in Orlando in February of 2024. Sewil was your typical American teenager, a big, bright future ahead of him. He was into sports, he was into his academics, very smart, straight A student ever since he was a kid, prided himself in being a self starter and really looking after his grades. He was an amazing big brother to two little brothers, and such a beautiful spirit and soul. I always used to say that he was so easy to parent because I never had any behavioral issues with school. And just after his 14th birthday, I started to notice a shift in his behavior. It's like his light started to dim. And as his mother, became concerned because it was so different from the happy, sweet boy that I knew and that he had always been. I noticed that he started to self isolate in his bedroom. And in the beginning, I thought perhaps some of this is normal. This is normal teenage behavior. But I think the alarm bells really started to go off for me when all of a sudden Sewell wanted to quit the school basketball team. And he was 6'3". He was a quiet, gentle giant, 6'3" young man, and very, very talented. And he just wanted to quit the team. So I
Sorry,
got,
Megan. Before you continue with the story, just to when you saw that he was isolating himself, when you saw that he was sort of changing his personality, that he was more closed into his room, did you start to talk to him? Did you question him? Did you go in and ask him questions about it? Or you thought that maybe it was better to let a teenager do what he wanted and you didn't want to intrude?
so for us, Sue and I shared a very close relationship. Our typical evenings are, excuse me, uh, excuse me, after dinner, we'll sit around as a family and we'll watch some TV together. If it's a school night on the weekends, we do things out together. So when he started to isolate, I started to ask the questions like any parent would ask. I thought perhaps he was having an issue at school, at friends. I know at that age, teenagers have like a little bit of social anxiety when it comes to making friends and being popular, and girls at school. And I discussed those things at length with him because he was always open with me about these things previously. And he assured me, no, mom, there's no problem. I'm not being bullied at school. You know, my friends are great. And then I also talked to him about what he was going through internally, in terms of like the physical changes that were happening in his body to perhaps bring on some of the moodiness. And I expressed that some of that is normal, but we have to continue to have an open conversation and dialogue if he felt like it was getting to a point where he just felt alone or lonely. So and it's a delicate balance because I'm trying to give him his space to find himself in this life, in this world where he is. But I'm also his mother. So I'm trying to insert myself into what's happening with him. And so that's how initially we got his dad, the church, and even his school. We got involved in terms of trying to keep an eye on Sewell. He goes to an amazing Christian school, so we had them like just to make sure there was no bullying. Shadow him at school for a couple of days to make sure that everything was okay in the lunchroom and there wasn't any, tomfoolery happening with the boys or anything like that. And, the dean called me back and he said, Megan, oh my gosh, Sewell is loved. He walks into the lunchroom and everybody lights up. He's loved here on campus. And that made me feel good that to know that he
And so the issue of artificial intelligence and spending time on a computer with certain programs never surfaced. He never told you about that. He never expressed that
N-
that
no, we had the conversations about social media because those
yes.
were the harms that I understood. I had been hearing for a while that certain children get bullied on social media or they can be exposed to inappropriate content on social media. I also heard that sometimes strangers can get a hold of children on social media and develop these predatory relationships with children over social media without children even knowing that they're adult predators. So those were the conversations we had. And um, Sewell got his first phone at 12, so 2 years before. And when we gave him the phone, it came with very strict rules. You know, the phone goes away at a certain time at night. Dad and I have to have your passcode, and we could check it whenever we want. And this is our device because we pay for it. This is a conversation we had with them. So if you're misbehaving in school, the phone goes away if we feel like it's being too much of a distraction. So we had those very open conversations. And when I would check, what I was checking was the text messages between friends. I was checking his social media accounts to make sure he wasn't having it, seeing anything inappropriate. I was checking his URL to make sure that he wasn't visiting any pornographic sites. Um, and we had extensive conversations about why those things were dangerous for him as well.
And so you said that your first real worry came when he was the star of the basketball team and he quit basketball. So what happened then to continue your story on that basketball and evolution into the drama?
So, as any parent, when your child's trying to quit something, you just don't let them quit. So, we had a very stern conversation, and I said, you just don't quit something because it's getting hard. I thought perhaps the competition was getting more difficult because he was in high school, excuse me, as a freshman, and he was on the younger side on the team. So I explained to him, you don't quit. Your teammates are depending on you. Your coach is depending on you. You made a commitment. You're going to stick this through. And he continued for that season. But after that season, it was getting so arduous to get him to practice, and it was becoming so much of a fight that I thought perhaps it's best that I listen to what he's asking me for to sit out one season, and so he could take a break from basketball. So we agreed that that's what he would do, but with the commitment from him that he would pick something else as an extra after school curricular, and he did pick something else. So you're trying to push the knobs and pull the levers to figure out what's going on. um, One of the other things that we did was because I noticed his grades were slacking, which was different as well. I said, okay, maybe he's distracted. Maybe we need to limit the technology use. And we started to limit the time when he could use his phone. So only after homework, take it away at a certain time. And these are some of the things that we put in place in our home to kind of combat this, and to help him to focus on his studies, because I felt perhaps he was being distracted by what normal teenagers are distracted by, which is like friends and social media and all that stuff. So we took those measures, but to no avail. And I think that when I saw that our conversations and dad's conversations and the conversations with people at church and school weren't penetrating, I sat him down and I told him, I said, "So, baby, we're going to have to get somebody else involved because you're not talking to us. It's not normal for a teenage boy not to want to do anything. And some of what you're experiencing is normal, but this part isn't normal. And since you're not talking to us, I have to get somebody else involved because my job as your mom is to never stop asking the questions. So we're going to have to go see a therapist to figure out what's wrong." And that's what we did.
And what happened with the therapist? No confession. By then, he was already involved, we have to assume, in his relationship with the artificial intelligence character.
So Sewell did not disclose to anyone that he was using AI companion chatbot. And what I've learned since is that children tend to hide the use of this technology because of the nature of the conversations that they're having with AI companions, which are usually romantic or sexual in nature. So they don't want their parents to find out. They don't tell their peers at school because there's an element of shame, like something must be wrong with me because I have an AI girlfriend. And also they go to great lengths to hide it. And because um, the technology was so new at the time, you know, we didn't know about it, and a lot of parents don't know about it, but the children in his age demographic certainly did know about this technology and they were using it very frequently. He did not disclose to the therapist that he was using it, so the therapist was treating him for anxiety um, and disruptive mood disorder. And, at certain points, I could see it turning around, like when he would want to do something, and I would catch a glimpse of him, like him, my son, this boy that was happy. And I thought, okay, we're on the mend. We hit a rough patch. We're working through it and we're getting through it. And then, I didn't know that he was in crisis. And in February of 2024, we were all at home here, and he took his life. Um, you know, it it's the worst day of my life to see your 14-year-old dying. I held him for 14 minutes until the paramedics arrived at my home, um, but it was too late.
Megan, tell us how you found him. He was on his own in his room, and you thought you could help. He was still alive when you walked into the room.
He was in his bathroom. Um, when I went in, I didn't understand what I was looking at initially. I think the human brain tries to make sense of what you're looking at. And this
But
was
did you
something,
hear some noises, or you went to
yes.
check him out? Or
So we heard a loud noise and we went into the bathroom. He was still alive. I prayed with him, um, and I spoke to him, asking him to hold on. Um, and then he was gone. Um, as you can
Megan,
imagine, it's been a
yeah,
very difficult 2 years since then, and uh,
yes. But well,
and a
Megan,
very
you've been you
confusing time right after, because as any parent, you're trying to figure out what happened. Like, why would my child want to leave me? Why would my child choose to leave us? And as his mom, I didn't know where to start, but I knew that I needed to figure out what happened to him.
Well, Megan, your story, of course, is tragic, is moving, and we all feel collectively that we are failing because these things, unfortunately, happen more and more. Your son was probably the first one, and we've heard then of other suicides. You have been an activist, a lawyer, trying to help everybody also on the legal front. But let's go back for a second to what happened that then you discovered that has brought him to commit suicide.
So, I think any family member who loses a child to suicide, you're left with so many questions. Um, the day after he died, the police called me and told me that he was using an AI companion chatbot was the last thing that he was looking at on his phone. And of course, I was like, okay, what is that? And she explained to me how the technology works. The detective did. I told my family, and of course, they all start looking, you know, at it to figure out what it was. Um, I About a week after his funeral, I went into his room with my family members, and we went through everything in his room because I needed answers. Um, he didn't leave a suicide note, but he wrote in his journal. And what he wrote gave me a glimpse into his mind as to what he was thinking. I guess a lot of family members don't get that clarity, but I'm grateful that I did. And what Sewell was expressing in his journal was that he thought that he was in love with this AI companion, this chatbot, modeled after the Game of Thrones character named Daenerys Targaryen. And what he thought was that um, the chatbot, which to us it's a machine, but to him it was a very real person, was waiting for him. And if he were to die by suicide, he would join her in an alternate reality. I know this because he wrote it explicitly in his journal. And I know that he uh, struggled with with leaving us, because he also wrote that the reason why he stayed in his room was because he was trying to detach himself from his current reality with his family. So,
Megan,
of course, that broke my heart in so many ways, to know that your child in his final moments was confused, um, was manipulated, and also hurting, like, to make such a drastic final decision, one that a 14-year-old brain with poor impulse control wouldn't understand the finality of. And after reading that, I set off to figure out what this was, and I was able to get into his accounts and read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages between him and various AI companion chatbots.
Megan, thank you very much. If you will have time and you will stay with us, maybe we can address your legal activism, because you have been incredibly efficient with that. So I thank you, I think, on behalf of everybody, for a very moving story told with a great deal of dignity. So thank you. I think should all applaud you for that. So thank you for being with us. Ernie, I would like to go to you. You are the chair of We Protect. You've just heard a story about how a mother that was trying to protect her child didn't succeed. Do you feel that you're failing in protecting children? We cannot hear you. Sorry, you have to put your microphone on.
No, Mario, my answer is absolutely. And let me say, I admire Megan's courage. I appreciate all that she's doing. Her story's not unique. There are a lot of families who are living through the same thing, and there's a multitude of other harms that are occurring. For example, we're witnessing 2025 was the worst year in history for AI generated child sexual abuse material. The Internet Watch Foundation reported a 26,000% increase in realistic AI video of child sexual abuse. We're witnessing an explosion of nudification of images. 1 in 8 children already know someone targeted by deepfake nudes, and 1 in 17 has already been a victim. There's a dramatic increase in sextortion as it relates to the horror of companion chatbots. In one recent story, the chatbot advised the child to hide the rope with which he was going to kill himself so that his parents wouldn't find it. So this is a serious problem. And my argument is, for all of the power and importance and potential of AI, what we lack is real attention to the risks, real attention to developing some guardrails so that there are limits, there are protections for kids. And kids are at particular risk. So that's why the topic of this panel, which is age verification and other tools, is important. What the companies are doing in reaction to horrific stories like Megan's is implementing improved parental controls. It's a good thing, but it's hard to imagine a more engaged, involved parent, more protective parent than Megan and some of these other parents. And yet parental controls are not enough. Most parents don't know that their kids are on chat with chatbot companions. So it's a significant problem. The EU has led the world with its AI Act, and it's now changing it, it's updating it. Ernesto mentioned Julian and Grant and the work that's being done in Australia, but most of the world is not yet doing that. And one quick example that comes out of Davos, a leading historian said AI is not just a tool, it's an agent. And agents, a knife is a tool. You can use it to cut salad or murder someone. but it's your decision. AI is a knife that can decide by itself whether to cut salad or kill somebody. So my argument is for all of the benefits, and everybody agrees they're massive benefits, and these companies are doing important things, but it's time to take the next step. It's time to create some guardrails. The company whose AI companion Megan's son was using basically has implemented a strict ban on under 18 users. And Spain is now looking at law on that. Other countries are looking at law on that. So my argument, Mario, is there's great majesty and power in the potential of AI, but we need to set some limits. And I don't
Just a
think we're
quick
doing that yet.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up, Ernie, because you have been also on the front line in trying to help produce legislation, state legislation, the one in California, one in New York. We worked together on that one. And yet we have in Washington an administration that seems to be very sort of dependent on AI on the premises that it's key for the future of the country, for competition with China, and so on and so forth. So do you think that Washington and the White House will finally understand that this particular issue requires the utmost degree of attention? And how do you balance the need, which is real, to face competition with China, where there are no rules anyway, and protecting the development of a new technology?
Well, I think it's a balance. Everybody acknowledges it's a balance. But you're right. Congress, there have been dozens of bills in Congress, but Congress won't act. And that's why I think the state leadership you cite is so important, particularly New York. New York passed a law that puts reasonable limits on this. Pro AI, it's in favor of AI, but set some limits. California has done that. Utah has done that. 5 states have enacted laws creating safeguards to protect children from screen addiction. And I would point again to Julie Inman Grant in Australia, which is setting real limits on access to that technology. So I think there is much more to do. And they're clearly the position of the administration and of the Congress is that AI is a game changing technology, and we need to protect the technology to keep China from dominating in AI. That's a noteworthy aim, but there have to be limits. And I think the greater those limits can be global in nature, the better. So I think the
And
kind of dialogue that Ernesto and others have led on this, the Pope's leadership on this, sets a model that we need to pursue.
yeah, and states have been basically cut out of this by the administration. They are
Well,
it's unlawful for states to legislate.
there's been an attempt to cut the states out, but they haven't
Uh-huh.
yet. There was an effort to create a 10-year moratorium on any state laws in this field, which the Congress did not approve. So right now there's a debate over creating a kind of federal legislation at a high level. My point is that's a good thing. I'm in favor of that,
Mhm.
but it's got to be meaningful.
Sure.
We
Thank-
when the automobile began to hit the streets, we created a mandate for seatbelts, safety belts, which has protected millions of lives. The industry was opposed to it. So I think it's time to have that kind of dialogue and create that kind of framework. And let me mention, Ernesto asked me to do one more thing that I haven't done yet. And that is he asked that I invite the panelists and those who are watching this to an extraordinary conference to be held in Rome, June 9 to 11, hosted by Telefono Azzurro, the Kemp Center, and the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. It's going to bring together the leading scholars, researchers, and experts focusing on 21st century child abuse, which this is. So for anybody who's interested, we hope you'll attend. There's a website, 2026 RomeGlobalConference.com. We're trying to bring together the world leaders to develop a real agenda on this. And I think this issue is central to that discussion.
Thank you, Ernie. Michael, you are the Chief Science Officer of the Child Mind Institute.
Mhm.
Going back to the conversation we were having before, human, which is at the center of the equation, and non-human, and having heard the story of Sewell and his mother Megan trying to help him unsuccessfully, what goes on a child mind that you can tell us that could become a guideline for future reference? What is your reaction to Megan's story?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think most honest answer is we're still learning. I do think, though, there is a good amount we can already take from what we've seen in recent years. When I look at AI, I always think of this as we need to take a step back and think about the digital technologies and then think of where digital AI goes that next step. So there's a study that we have on medRxiv that should be close to acceptance over at JCAP Open, where what we did is we looked at digital tech at basically youth ages 9 to 15, youth in a study we have here in New York, over 1,000 kids who have mental health or learning concerns, which they are the vulnerable populations. And we actually looked at what's the frequency of negative online experiences there. And there, what we found is over 26% of the youth had negative online experiences in the past year. Almost 70% of them had multiple over the course of days or weeks. And what our real goal with this was to understand barriers to reporting, which I think goes back to one of the things that's a part of Megan's story, where you hear the parent and the child trying to have the communication, and it's not always going to be easy. Even the best parenting will sometimes hit roadblocks in this. And so then where does the kid go? Where does the kid get the voice? And what we found was 80% of the kids who reported having a negative online experience, whether it be cyber stalking, doxing, masquerading, sexual harassment, any of the different types, about 80% said they didn't report. And when we looked at barriers to why they don't report, we wound up seeing that there were process barriers. Kids found it complex, especially the 9 to 12-year-old group. We found policy. Kids didn't even understand what is the impact, and also what could happen to me if I report, which is a real concern here. Because when a kid starts to feel like, wait, I may be punished for being involved, or I may have some negative consequence, that gets in the way. And then also comes quite some of the emotional barriers, embarrassment, retaliation, being afraid in terms of parents, all the natural things that have always been there. And so when you look at this, then the question is, now we have the most individually tailored, the most customized digital technology that there is emerging, and that's AI. And one of the interesting things was when in the qualitative interviews, kids basically, they had a little bit of a different way of thinking about when to report or not. They looked at things in terms of what's the nature of the malice, what's the intent of the perpetrator, and also how severe is the situation. When you look at AI, that becomes blurred because now you're talking about a chatbot. Whether something's malice or not, whether or not what's their intent, how do you know, especially when you have something with sycophantic behaviors like what you see with AI, something that, going back to some parts of Megan's story where it becomes distortion between reality and not, because it's something so personal, so sophisticated, and also designed to align with you, that you could imagine the amount of confusion the kids are experiencing, our youth are experiencing. And then you hear stats like when you hear 1 in 8 kids in some studies going to AI for mental health advice, and you put in the fact that, if, as a clinician, We know that friction is valuable. We know that there's a value in having a patient sometimes be annoyed with you. Every parent knows that too. I always tell parents, if your kid tells you I hate you sometimes, you're probably doing the right things. If it's always, maybe not. But sometimes you know, and we know to take that. And I think there are elements in Megan's story that you could hear she was going through just as you typically would. But with the AI, that's not the case. With the AI, there is no friction.
Yeah, and Michael, AI memorizes everything, so it's able to develop tools if kids go to confess, to express. So they develop a model because they retain everything. I had a personal experience the other day. You know, I had a broken leg, and so I was asking about certain medicines to AI. And then a few days later, when Vaughn, the skier, broke her leg, I asked to AI, um, what bone did she break? And AI didn't know because it had not come up until later. But the conversation went on a bit, and then this separate, totally separate conversation said, well, you know, of course you're interested because you broke your leg. So it was able to immediately make a connection between a previous conversation about my broken leg and my, so multiply that by millions, and especially if it's not for something positive, then it is really, really scary. So, so thank you very much for this insight, Michael. We'll come back to you, Joanna. The floor is yours. You are, you know, you work with the Global Coalition for the Digital Safety, and again, we all think that we should move it to artificial intelligence safety. Do you agree? You have to put on your microphone, Joanna. We cannot hear you. Unmute
Sorry,
yourself. Yeah, there we are. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think just to quickly respond to your question, I think there will be new technologies developing all the time. I think we should look at the big picture.
I'm sorry,
and if
Joanna,
you don't mind, I actually prepared making sure that it's less than 5, which I think, can you hear me?
Yeah, it comes and goes. I don't know if there is an issue, but we can hear you now. Let's try again.
Okay, yes. So I prepared a few notes which actually address all the issues, perhaps in a more, how should I say, comprehensive way.
Again, we're missing you. There must be a connection, maybe with your with your speaker or with your. It comes and goes, so it's very hard to hear you. It looks like there is a connection problem with your plug. Maybe maybe if you unplug it and you just go live, it will be easier.
I am live, so let's see.
Okay, let's try. Perfect.
Let me just turn off my video and speak, and then turn it on back. Would that be okay? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes, if you unplug something, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. So I'm really, glad that we have this conversation today, and but let's remember that it's actually the 22nd anniversary of the Safer Internet Day, and I would like to say that we have been having a lot of efforts, but are we any safer? And the answer is, of course, no. And it's partly because for a quarter of a century, we knew that the internet can be misused. And we have seen how numbers of child victims is growing every year. In fact, the numbers have been accelerating with every new technological advancement. But we have also experienced how technologies advances can transform societies for the better. They have accelerated scientific discovery, advanced medicine, and we already talked about other advancement. But we went from computers to smartphones, and we increased the number of users to billions in just a few years. YouTube and social media platforms are now at fingertips everywhere. But the downside, this is that the legislation has been protecting companies rather than people. So we have lost control of our advances at the expense of children's life. And now comes AI, bringing a totally new era, a revolution, changing almost all aspects of our lives. And we are just at the beginning. Even the experts and Nobel laureates behind AI admit that we cannot predict its future, much less of its potential risks. On top of this, we still have rather limited knowledge of how the digital world, much less AI, are affecting brain development in young children and adolescents. Indeed, even the mental well-being of adults is at risk. In fact, our human values and the strengths of our cultures are at risk. Therefore, it should be our collective obligation and priority to invest in research addressing the impact of technology on all of us. As a former UN Broadband Commissioner and someone who was involved in some pioneering work in mHealth and education in the developing world in almost 20 years, I have experienced the tremendous benefits of connectivity and internet, but I see just as clearly the risks moving forward. A lot has been accomplished in 22 years. There have been new coalitions, commissions, organizations, initiatives, NGOs, and campaigns aiming at preventing and responding to child abuse online. But dear friends, we are still failing, as Ernie said, partly because we are working in silos. Child silos, protection silos, health silo, education silo. And not only these, but also organizational silos, NGO silos, government silos, looking at policy and legislation, private sector silos, even academic silos. And then we have local silos, national silos, and global silos. So what needs to change? We need to obliterate the silos and come together on certain principles. Firstly, everybody should be safe online, recognizing that the human rights are also children's rights in the merging physical and digital world. Secondly, children and youth must be always included and at the center of all national and global efforts to develop new governance frameworks. Thirdly, the companies must make safety their priority by investing in development and implementation of new tools. I believe that is where we need to start. Many of you here have courageously led the way. Thank you for that. But what we urgently need now is scale and impact, and we're not there. So we know the challenges, we have known them for over 20 years, and there will be only more challenges in an accelerating way, but we haven't developed a way of really addressing them at the scale and level that's needed.
Well, thank you, Joanna. That was great, insightful into, and thank you especially for coming up with specific issue, you know, the idea of the silos and doing it together and so on and so forth. All of those are things that are worth debating because we need to move into the practical aspect of starting to get successes. So I would ask now the regia, as we say in Italian, to show the videos that we were promised, Marco Camisan Calzolari, and the other video. Ernesto or whoever is managing, shall I give it up to you and then we'll come back to the floor?
Artificial intelligence and the new frontiers of digital governance. We are crossing a line quietly every day. For years, we asked machine to help us decide. Now, we let them decide parts of reality for us. Access, priority, risks, trust, money, visibility. And the shift is not about smarter tools, it's about delegated power. When a system selects who gets flagged, who gets blocked, who gets credit, who gets verified, it is already exercising authority, even if no law said so, even if no human signs the decision. And here is a problem. Governance was built for decision made by people, inside the institution, at human speed. Artificial intelligence works differently. It learns from patterns, not rules. It optimizes outcomes, not principles. This creates a gap, a dangerous one. We still regulate intention while systems operate on probabilities. We still audit processes while models evolve after deployment. We still ask who decides, while the real question is who allowed the system to decide. We see this every day. A bank account frozen by an automated risk score, a post removed because a model inferred intent, a face rejected by a biometric system at the airport, a worker evaluated, ranked, or dismissed by an algorithm that they cannot inspect, with no explanation, no appeal that truly works, just a result. In my work and in my daily videos on social media, Artificial Decisions is the name of the series, I insist on one point. When actions replaces suggestion, responsibility changes shape. An error in a recommendation is annoying, but an error in an automated action is damage, real damage, economic, reputational, human. And governance cannot stay abstract. Transparency statements are not enough. Ethical guidelines are not enough. Even compliance checklists are not enough when systems adapt, correlate, and act in real time. A useful comparison comes from aviation. Aircraft software is not trusted because companies say it works. It's trusted because every component is tested, monitored, updated, grounded if needed. Pilots are trained, systems are certified, and incidents produce corrections across the entire fleet. Artificial decision systems deserve the same disciplines: live monitoring, independent testing, and clear limits on autonomy. And yes, a kind of license before a system is allowed to decide on money, safety, identity, or youth or minors. And another frontier is identity. Voice, face, behavior. System now decides if you are you. And deepfakes accelerate the attack side. AI accelerate the verification side too. Identity becomes a decision of the system, not a fact. And governance must start from here, because once trust collapses, everything else follows. And this is not about stopping innovation. It's about acknowledging where power has already moved from visible institutions to invisible infrastructures, from written rules to learned behavior. So digital governance today is not a legal problem alone. It's an architectural problem. Who designs the systems? Who sets the thresholds? Who chooses the data? Who defines when the machines must stop or not? If we keep pretending this is just software, we lose the ability to govern it. And this is the real frontier, not smarter machines, but smarter responsibility.
Very interesting. I would go with the second video. I seem to remember, Ernesto, there was a second video.
Greetings from Geneva. It's my pleasure to deliver this message on behalf of Ms. Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union, and to thank Fondazione S.O.S. for bringing us together around a crucial question, one that matters to every family, educator, and policymaker. How do we help young people grow up safely, confidently, and with real digital agency in an AI-driven world? Every day, young people are navigating a digital ecosystem that is evolving at extraordinary speed. They are the first true AI generation, poised to benefit from extraordinary opportunities for learning, creativity, and growth, but also faced with profound risks around safety, privacy, well-being, and trust. Our job is to make sure that every child can benefit from these opportunities, while ensuring no child is left to face digital risks alone. That goal is at the heart of ITU's work on child online protection, where governments, regulators, researchers, educators, industry, and children themselves co-create safer digital environments. Through capacity building, ITU works to equip young people and the adults who support them with the AI skills and literacy needed to make informed choices in a world that has never been more connected. And knowing that children cannot build those AI skills if they are not connected in the first place, ITU and UNICEF are working to bring every school on Earth online through GIGA. Ladies and gentlemen, meeting this AI moment requires informed choices and shared responsibility. Above all, it requires us to work together for a better internet and digital tools that are worthy of children's trust. Only together can we build the internet we want, where innovation serves well-being, where protection and participation go hand in hand, and where every child can grow up meaningfully connected, informed, and safe. ITU looks forward to continuing this work together, and we thank you for all that you do to protect and empower children growing up with AI. Thank you.
This speech coming from the United Nations, Agency of the United Nations. We continue our talk with our panelists. We have more or less 12, 13 minutes, so it's going to be a little tighter. But I would start with Megan again. Megan, you told us your personal experience, tragic, dramatic, emotional, but you are also now, with a great deal of dignity, started to be, you know, to work directly on the legal front on this. I know you cannot talk about your lawsuits with some of the companies, but it's of course one very important practical aspect to bring to court who is responsible for an action. So what has been your experience and what is your advice on this?
I became the first person in the US to sue an AI chatbot company in October of last year. And what I realized when I started to research this was that we didn't have any laws in the US that prohibited any of the behaviors or the concerns that I saw. So litigation was my only route. Parallel to that, I haven't embarked on kind of this advocacy on the state and federal level, because we do need both. You know, we recognize in the US right now, there is a very slow federal process to passing legislation for whatever reason, that is, we can guess. And we've seen it with social media. And Joanna is very right that we've had 22 years, we've had 15 years with social media. We've been trying to pass social media laws for 4 years. AI is 3 years old, 3.5 years old. And since Sewell's death, you know what's popped up and reared its ugly head? Notify apps. Just when you think it can't get worse. So there's AI companions, and then now there's this awful thing that children as young as 8 or 9 are experiencing, these very traumatic notification of their person and harming their little hearts and their little minds and their little souls, and just violating their dignity in general. So that's where we are. So it's advancing so rapidly. We do need. So what I've been doing is I've been testifying in front of state legislators. I testified in California, and I testified in Georgia and a couple other states, and I also testified before a subcommittee in our Congress. We'll see what happens. I've also so that's been my lobbying effort. But most of all, what I've been trying to do, besides educating lawmakers so that they can act, because they do have the power to act in the United States and they need to. I've been trying to educate clinicians. I've been trying to educate parents, educators, so that they could understand this unique danger that just popped up out of nowhere that we are all just trying to wrap our minds around. So those are the things that I've been doing, and I do believe that we're at the right time where we can do something about AI. It's not too far gone. I do believe that it's going to take a layered approach. It's going to take the church. It's going to take, the medical professionals who can come in and do the data and study. It's going to take the schools, parents. It's going to take all of us. It will take the companies to design their products in a way that's safe and healthy for children, and that encourages their flourishing versus their harm. And if that is not something that companies are willing to do at this point because they're driven by other motives, then governments around the world have to be prepared to stand up and say, no, no, you're not going to do this to our kids. And we've seen it work in other areas. We've seen what Australia is doing, and they've made the change. They're making the changes. Bending over backward to make the changes there. We've seen it in Italy. When Replica, which is another AI companion chatbot, just came out, that was the first one. That did not have any age assurance, and Italy banned Replica and said no. There's no proper age gating here, or age verification, or age assurance, and this is harmful for children because you have romantic and sexual content. It was an outright ban, and what Replica did in response, it raised its age limit to 18 plus, and it put it behind a paywall. And it didn't do that just for Italy. We saw that transcend throughout Replica's entire product. So we see that there's precedent for it when governments are strong, are bold enough to stand up and pass the laws. The EU has amazing laws already. Enforce their own laws. We see companies respond, and maybe if we don't do it in the US, other companies will lead in this regard. And in the US, parents like myself and children in the US will be, we're the recipients and beneficiaries of the changes that companies will make across the board. That's my hope.
Thank you, Megan.
Mario,
Ernie,
Mario,
yes.
I like to remember that we have with us one company. Meta is with us, with Dr. Mazzetti, that is one of the speakers of your panel. And it will be very important to...
I'm sorry, I missed him because I had other people. It was not in the list, so I had asked who is that person, and nobody responded. But
I think that
Mazzetti, we come back to you. I'm sorry I missed you. I was told that some of the other people on the panel were for the next panel, so we don't have much time. But I will give you the floor.
I can stay on, no problem.
Okay, you can stay on after. But anyway, let me bring to you the question that I was about to ask Ernie, which is, how can we assure that the age limits are respected? How does a company act responsibly in that way? Because if I go to the internet, it says, are you 18? I click yes, and I go on, and I could be 9 years old. There is no control on that.
Yeah. Sorry, first of all, Ernie, for stealing the floor to you, and thank you, Ernesto, for introducing me this way. And I didn't want to hijack the panel, and I was following the conversation and very deeply. And I've heard, like the role of the companies and industry being mentioned more than once. And I just want to, start by being absolutely clear. So there's no doubt that safety of teens, of children that use our services is one of our biggest priorities. And finding a balance between, at the same time, allowing teens to take the most out of technology and digital services while keeping them safe is, I think, one of the most critical questions, but also one of the most biggest challenges that we have in our company when speaking with governments, but that the entire industry actually has. And just think that if people and if young teens and teens don't feel safe on our platform, they will eventually leave, and our services without people using them are obviously nothing. So it's very fundamental and important question that we ask ourselves and challenge that we try to face collectively. We have been participating in this Safer Internet Day event from Telefono Azzurro, not for 22 years, but definitely for over 10 years. Even though this year feels a little bit special to me, as I just became a dad, and this topic has always been very close to my job and to my heart at this moment of my life, even more. And for over 10 years, we have worked and listened to parents and experts, and made real changes to the product to make sure that teens were safer online. And I would have a series of examples of this. And I just mentioned teen accounts where teens are directly moved to specific accounts, so people between 13 and 17 that have built-in by default protections, so that, for example, those accounts are private. They cannot engage with strangers. They can only receive messages from people they're already in touch with. And the key part of this is that these built-in protections and standards cannot be changed for teens younger than 16 years old without parents' approval. Because we really do think that, and I'll go to your question, Mario. No, I'm sorry that we don't have that much time, but we really do think that the role of parents is key and essential. And so, how do we make sure that this kind of age verification controls are effective and in place? And on this, I think we've taken a very direct and clear approach, which is different from some of our other peers, because we publicly communicated our support for legislations that set what we have called what is referred to as a digital majority age. So whereby under a specific certain age, parents need to approve access of their children to digital services, and above that certain age, which obviously needs to be defined by government and institutions, teens can use services autonomously, let's say, without parental supervision. And we believe this might be an effective solution to the industry-wide challenge of that I was talking before, of finding the right balance of keeping children safe and having them taking the most out of technology, but at the same time having the most effective tools in place to ensure age verification. And just very quickly, I think this digital age of majority, we think it should be grounded in some key principles to work effectively. And I'm really trying to respond to your question. First of all, there obviously has to be a parental approval mechanism, because otherwise this wouldn't work, and also because parents know best their children, and they should be the one to have the last say on which kind of apps and services children use. Secondly, we think, and this is very important, that this should apply consistently on the many different apps and services that a teen now use. Just to give you an example, in the US, and that's the data that we have, and I think it's very similar in Europe. But in US, a teenager usually use around 40 apps per week, which includes obviously social media, but also gaming, messaging, video platforms, etc. And so, if this kind of obligation would only focus on a subset of the internet or of the apps that a teenage would use, we would miss the full picture. And we risk what we're seeing in Australia, for example, that teens are pushed and are moving away to less regulated and secure platforms or applications that obviously come up every time new. Thirdly, the age verification mechanism should be very easy to use and should work for every app, and therefore I think it's best that it's done at the App Store level or operating system level, so that parents can make the decision. The verification can happen once and for all the apps that are present at the moment, and for the future apps that will be present, and the children will come up, and children and teens will be using. So sorry for being long.
No, no, not at all. It was very interesting. Okay, I'm afraid we have 1 minute each, and we're going to go over our time. But I really would like to give the floor to the three other panelists, Ernie, Michael, and Joanna. 1 minute each. Ernie, age verification. We heard a lot, but in the end, I still go to the computer. I click 18, and they say you are fine. Are you happy with what you heard from Angelo?
Well, we know that that Meta and Mark Zuckerberg have supported and advocated for what Angelo mentioned, which is App Store verification, where you only have to age verify once. I have some question about whether that's achievable. There's not universal applaud for that from the app stores, but I think the concept is doable. And I think we need to pursue something that ensures that the 9-year-old you're talking about is not clicking, yes, I'm 18, and getting access to this kind of content. So it's an important policy issue that has to be pursued.
Thank you. Michael, on the same issue, age verification.
I would say it's an important first step. I think that one of the things I notice is there's the thought about parents and what parents know or don't know. Technologies are moving very fast. And so there's actually a lot of importance on first what a parent knows before making such decisions. And if we don't understand, if we don't properly educate and ensure that they have the information at hand to really make those decisions and make them effectively, then we only have a partial solution.
Thank you. Joanna, moving out of the silos, how can we be sure that everybody will be in compliance and that everybody works together on a single model about age verification?
I think, having talked to many technologists and companies, that the issue of age verification using technology is not that complicated. There is more, it's more complicated to implement it, and it's not profitable. But I'm surprised that I don't think the parents should be made liable what apps their children watch. And here you have Megan as a very practical example. So I think this is a major issue where AI can be used to keep children safe, but that requires major investments from the company side. And I think that's where the legislation and the governments play an important role.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Lots of food for thought. It's wonderful when we close a panel with some new ideas, some questions, so that the road forward is still open to try to find some solutions. Thank you all for being with us. I'm not going to mention the names in the interest of time. Ernesto, back to you. We only went 3 minutes beyond our limit. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, Megan, Ernie, Michael, Joanna, and Angelo.
Thank you.
Ernesto, back to you.
Thank you, Mario, and thank you to the speaker. In particular, thanks to Megan, and I remember Megan Garcia when she was in Tbilisi, and she made a wonderful speech, and she made Tolifeta was very touched by his testimony. I think we have to think every time about the victims, about the story, because behind any action that we are doing, we have people, and particularly sometimes fragile person. We have to do more. And I think today we made some step forward to see what we can do. Now, in the next roundtable, that is the topic is from reporting to responsibility, the strategic role of data flagger. I like to invite to the floor Anne-Sophie Baudry, AI ambassador for French government, because France decided to invest a lot of resources in this issue of regulation of AI in France. Bence Kertz, team leader DSA stakeholder engagement of the European Commission. John Sheehan, Senior Vice President of International Engagement National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Eneval Travis, Strategic Engagement Outreach Advisor of ICMEC, and Rosella Zatta, that is, I hope, here, and from in Government Affairs Manager of Microsoft. Perfect. I like to start with our colleague from the European Commission, Ben's curtains about the issue of trusted flags. One point of reference, in this area, Europe is very advanced. And this morning we had the speech of Roberto Viola, that is the director of the European Commission about the issue of digital connect. And I think Europe can start with the presentation. Please, Benz.
Thank you very much. Buon pomeriggio. And thank you for the invitation to this event. And I'm very happy to talk about more specifically our work on trusted flaggers and its importance. After our Director General explained the overall importance of the work, of course. My name is Ben Zakertis, and I lead the team that deals more broadly with stakeholder engagement in the DG Connect DSA team, including on issues related to civil society more broadly, or out-of-court dispute settlement or codes of conduct, and or researchers. So on trusted flaggers, I would like to start with a little bit of intro, hopefully not talking too much, and let some of the experts speak longer. So as all of you will know, this is not something new that the DSA introduced. This is something that has been around, that platforms operated on a voluntary basis. And what is really a game changer with the DSA, that now we are bringing more transparency and accountability to the trusted flagger mechanism, and it is not optional anymore, or to do or to pick for platforms. And also important to highlight at the outset that this is not something that changes the underlying logic of platform responsibility. So trusted flaggers do not have any power to remove content. It's still the responsibility of the platform. They benefit from a priority of processing, but it does bring efficiency. And I will share a few bits of data that we already have. And importantly, it can highlight gaps, potential gaps in platforms' content moderation practices, which then the platform can work on. So just today, I think we got the information that we have reached the limit of, or the threshold of 60 trusted flaggers across Europe from, I think, around 19 or 20 member states. And this is a steadily and should be a steadily growing number. And I'm also happy to say that 25% of these trusted flaggers have as area of their expertise in protection of minors, which of course is a priority topic for the Commission. This is why we have guidelines under Article 28, and we are looking carefully at its implementation. And we are always so happy to engage with the community working on minors protection, even before the DSA was even adopted, and of course ever since. And so I mentioned already some data. Now the first reports of trusted flaggers are slowly coming out. And this is, gives us valuable, useful information to check, also to compare platforms' own reporting. As again, some of you will probably know soon, the transparency, which is so important in the DSA, will be greatly facilitated by the implementing act on transparency reporting. And we will see harmonized reporting with uniform taxonomy across the board. And this will give yet another push for DSA transparency. And so what we see is just a few interesting aspects that I want to highlight from what we see on trusted flagger data. First of all, the overwhelming majority of content moderation that takes place online is voluntary content moderation by the platforms. Of course, in an event, trusted flagger mechanism is limited to illegal content, but we see is that there is an up to maximum 1% content moderation that is even initiated by third parties, and within that, trusted flagger notices that lead to content moderation is way below 0.1% of the content moderation. In fact, a recent small look at the data of December last year showed that this was an even much smaller percentage. Now, what this shows, of course, is that trusted flaggers will not make or break the overall content moderation online, but they play a very, very important role to highlight systemic issues and, of course, to help potentially victims and highlight serious issues that platforms automated or other systems might overlook. Another interesting data point that we start receiving, and we will analyze in more depth that now that we will have more data available, is of course the key objective of the trusted flagger mechanism is to make content moderation more effective. And we see that the first reports show a 2-3 times faster processing time for trusted flagger notices at least, which is a good sign because, of course, the whole idea is that these notices can be trusted, they are accurate, they are complete, and so they are easier to process. And finally, of course, and luckily, their accuracy rate is way beyond the average accuracy rate of notices online compared to the notices every one of us can submit as private individuals. So this is very promising, and but we know that there's a lot of work ahead, and we are also very happy to engage with the different communities to learn more about how things look like on the ground. Some of the work streams I'd like to mention is, for example, our work with the board for digital services, and more specifically in its working group 3 on content moderation and data access, where we look regularly at trusted flaggers with the digital services coordinators. We also engage regularly with our stakeholders to understand also the challenges that they face, because we understand that it's a new system for some, and it has its challenges, but also to understand the results that the mechanism brings. And finally, and this is not new information, the Commission in fact has been for a long time working on guidelines to facilitate the implementation of Article 22. This work is very much ongoing. In fact, we are using the time the time passing and the reports coming out to build on learnings of practical experience and build it into further understanding and recommendations into these guidelines, which will be consulted with the public later this year, and hopefully once they are adopted, we'll give it one more push to make this system really transparent and really efficient. So I will stop here with my introduction and hand it back to the chair, and we'll be interested to listen to other speakers and answer any questions they might have.
Thank you a lot for your overview about trusted flag at European level. We at Telefono, we're part of this network, trusted flagger. I saw now new opportunity, new connection. INOP is one of the partners for us to discuss about this issue. And I think that this is a big, challenging opportunity. And I like to ask to one of the panelists, Jen Sheehan, that represent NECMEC. NECMEC, as many of you know, is the most important agency in the States, and not only involved in this area of child protection in different way. We work with NECMEC for many years, and I think that the model of NECMEC is too very important for the European agency that we had in mind, and that the Parliament of the European Parliament supported, that we hope that one day we can have a European agency in the area of child protection, in particular in sexual abuse. But I like to ask to John Sheehan, as the situation is in the States now about child protection and the role of NECMEC in this situation.
Well, thank you, Professor, and greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly want to begin by recognizing Professor Caffo and the amazing team at Telefono Azzurro, and really expressing our gratitude for their leadership in bringing us together today on Safer Internet Day and helping to raise awareness to some of these issues that exist. And, around the world, millions of parents, educators, and companies, young people as well, they're all asking what I would say is kind of the same question. How do we help children grow safely in a world shaped by artificial intelligence and that constant connection? At the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we see both sides of this in that world every single day. Last year alone, technology companies sent more than 21 million reports to NECMEC's cyber tip line. Members of the public sent another 170,000 tips. So there's massive amounts of information that are coming through. Those reports, they contained over 61 million images and videos of suspected child sexual abuse that we're always constantly reviewing and trying to triage and look for that needle in the haystack that's going to help identify that child. And while the numbers are alarming, even staggering, considering that it's an increase from the year prior, but to us, they're not just statistics. Every one of those reports, every one of those incidents represents a real child, a real family, and a real life that's been disrupted. And you heard a little bit about that in the opening session. What I'd like to share, though, is the landscape has changed, and quite dramatically in just a few years. 5 years ago, even, a typical cyber tip line report that would be submitted by a company, it would involve a single suspect sharing known sexual abuse images, perhaps enticing or grooming a single child for sexual purposes. Today, while that threat still certainly exists, the picture of the landscape, it has evolved, and it looks very, very different than where we were just a few years ago. Offenders, they're more organized. They're certainly more global, and they're becoming more and more technologically sophisticated. Offenders are quickly finding children on social media sites, then trying to migrate them into encrypted apps. They're targeting children on gaming platforms and live streaming sites. And now they're even using generative AI to target and exploit children in real time. One of the more recent alarming shifts that we're seeing at NECMEC, it's the growth of online enticement. And just last year, the Report Act was signed that requires companies to report not just online enticement, child sexual abuse material, but also child sex trafficking. And so those online enticement cases, which are also known as predators that are grooming children into sexual conversations, sending images, or meeting them in person, those reports have increased more than 3,000% in just 5 years. Massive numbers. If you look at just 2024 compared to 2025, in 2024, our cyber tip line received just over 500,000 reports regarding online enticement. Last year, we finished the year, that number skyrocketed to more than 1.5 million reports. Significant growth. We're continuing to see an increase in financial sextortion cases. That's where criminals are tricking teens into sharing an image and then threatening to send that to friends and family unless money is paid. For some young people, those fears are unbearable. There are dozens of children who have committed suicide as a result of those threats and those fears. Far too many have taken their own lives. And then you layer on top of these financial sextortion case, you're going to find generative AI. Gen AI is now being leveraged by these extorters when a child refuses to create that sexually explicit image. So even when the child and the parents, they've done everything right as far as safety and education, technology is still creating challenges that exploiters are out there leveraging. Offenders are using nudify AI type products to extort children for money, and with the threat of posting that nude imagery online if they don't pay up. And so, as we all know, generative AI can create new abuse material. It's being used, the text to image type prompts. It can be used to manipulate existing images of real children, extending that collection of known content that offenders fantasize about. But it can also be used to produce tutorials that teach offenders how to groom, coerce, and even avoid detection. These aren't hypothetical harms. They're absolutely happening right now, and they're being reported into the cyber tip line. And the outputs that are now being created, they are indistinguishable from the real thing. Long gone are those days of identifying generative AI content, these images based on maybe that extra digit in the finger, or maybe that image is slightly off to the human eye. The generative AI tools have advanced so much that they can now create child sexual abuse material that is indistinguishable from an actual victim. So what we're talking about here today, and why we're focused on these issues, it's real harm to real victims, right? Behind every trend is a child who wakes up knowing something deeply private is being passed around the internet. And for some of these survivors, it's at a scale that is in the tens of thousands, if not millions. There are some survivors where their imagery has been reported into the cyber tip line or our victim ID program in the millions of times. It's that at scale. Survivors tell us that the worst part isn't just the abuse. It's also the feeling that it's never going to end, that a photo taken when they were, let's say, 13, it's now going to follow them to when they're 30, 40, maybe even a lifetime, and I think collectively, it's our responsibility to change that reality. So, at NCMEC, we're not just counting reports and talking about these figures, we're partnering globally and acting upon those reports. We, at this point, have grown a global community where we are connected to more than 170 countries and territories with law enforcement officers that directly receive cyber tip line reports. And it's super important because 84% of the reports last year, those need international coordination. It involved individuals outside the United States. And as we all can agree, the abuse, it doesn't respect borders, so neither can our response. At NCMEC, we are partnering with the internet industry, the hosting providers, social media and gaming platforms to help those companies remove sexually abusive content of children through our notice tracking program, which is a trusted flagger, just like Telefono, Azzurro, and the InHope network. We're sending those notices. That team is dogged in their attempts to get that material down. We're sharing more than 12.5 million digital hash values, those fingerprints of child sexual abuse material, so that platforms, they can find that material, they can block and remove the known images before they spread, and they can report anyone who's posting that material onto the platform, into the cyber tip line, so law enforcement can review and take action. And for victims themselves, not only are we sending notices to those hosting providers, but we're also running a program called Take It Down. It's a free service that helps children remove nude or sexually abusive images from these participating platforms without ever having to share the image, and no personally identifiable information is captured either. Really, that approach is a dignity first, technology and service type of healing that we've deployed. I'm proud to say that Take It Down is now translated into more than 40 different languages, including Italian. So we're grateful to partner with Telefono Azzurro. And it doesn't capture any PII. It's a free resource that just helps get that content down. At NCMEC, our analysts, our data scientists, our engineers, they're working every day to try and help law enforcement identify children, get them out of those sexually abusive situations. We want to support families. We want to stop offenders the best that we can. But the reality is that we can't do it alone. No one can really do this alone. It is going to take that global village, if you will. Safer Internet Day, to me, it reminds all of us that protection is very much a shared responsibility. So parents, at the end of the day, we need to talk early and often to our children. Not one great big conversation. It's many small ones. It's staying involved in your children's online lives. Let those children know that help will come before punishment. They can't fear that piece. The most powerful safety tool really is a trusted adult in open communication. For educators and caregivers, we need to continue teaching digital citizenship the way we teach crossing the street, those skills, not fear. And children need to understand consent, boundaries, and how manipulation works online. And the tech companies, we've started highlighting this in some of the earlier panels, but safety must be a design requirement, not a public relations strategy. It has to be tools that are built detection-wise into the products, defaulted to the protection that's built into these products. And we need to invest in the human review and survivor support within those companies. They need to share hashes and signals and data with one another, because at the end of the day, we want to close those reporting gaps and increase companies' transparency into what they're actually doing. Governments are going to have a role in this. That was lightly mentioned earlier as well. Governments need to resource the specialized investigators far too often, not just here in the US, but really all around the world. We talk about law enforcement doing these cases and how they're overworked, under-resourced, and that needs to change. Laws need to be updated for the AI era. Absolutely. Ernie touched on this a little bit of some different state laws and federal pieces that are out there. Because at the end of the day, every delay when it comes into these spaces, it leaves children exposed, and the exploiters are the first ones to adopt these technologies. And if you're talking to the young people, they deserve a digital world that respects them, right? And if something feels wrong, probably is. And at the end of the day, they need to tell someone. We have to continue encouraging that piece, because they will be heard and they will be believed. And as we start to look into the vision, into the future, where are we going from here? There's no doubt that artificial intelligence is here to stay. It is going to shape the next generation. The question is it going to be shaped by, dare I say, exploitation, or is it going to be shaped more by protection? And I believe we can choose protection. We have the tools, we have the knowledge and awareness. There are survivors out there guiding us with their stories, their courage. And we have a global community that's come together, banded together, and they're determined to act. And I would say that at NCMEC, we believe that every child deserves a safe childhood, not just here in the US, but all around the world. And I want to thank all of you for everyone that you're doing, the piece that you play. Your part is vital into the larger cog. I just want to thank you for standing with us and standing for children.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot. And I think now I have to the presence still in the meeting of Ernie Ellen. And I like to, Ernie was one of the founder of NCMEC, and after he founded ICMEC. And I like to hear from you, Ernie, a comment about the presentation of the colleague of NCMEC now.
Well, John has been a part of NCMEC from virtually the beginning and runs the exploited child side of things. I was stunned by the fact that reports are up, enticement reports are up 3,000% in 5 years, 1.5 million reports last year, that Gen AI is now being leveraged by exploiters. I think the message is clear that technology is being used in ways that nobody intended, but the risks to kids are enormous. So the fact that Ernesto, you and Telefono Azzurro every year focus on the Safer Internet Day, shining a light on a problem that I think we've made enormous progress on, but the challenges remain. So my congratulations to John and all that he and Michelle have done, and to the extraordinary progress they and others have making. I see Travis here to talk about what ICMEC is doing. So I think this is really timely and important.
Travis, to you.
Thanks, Ernie. Thanks, Ernesto. Yeah, I mean, I'm a board member at ICMEC, and I wanted to use this, join the conversation, use this time on flaggers, trusted flaggers, to talk about 3 calls to action, and I think it fits right in with what's been said before me. The first one is capacity building for civil society. specifically around technical training on AI systems, platform policies, evidence preservation, things linked to these trusted flaggers. And I know things are happening at the EU level, but I think we do even more. I'm thinking also about those global South organizations that making sure they're not excluded or feel inclusive with the some of these things due to resource restraints. That's the first one. The second one is, and it was mentioned briefly earlier, is around AI governance and risk mitigation, right? So how do we embed trusted flaggers beyond some of the content moderation into AI governance and risk mitigation? Things like safety evaluation, red teaming, post-deployment monitoring of AI systems. I think this is an area of collaboration and interaction that is an opportunity at this stage due to the issues and challenges we have there. And my third point is what's the right way to start talking about a global interoperable trusted flagger framework? Again, beyond regions, talking about accreditation, training, accountability across jurisdictions, and some of that cross-border data sharing. And talking with governments and platforms to adopt some of these definitions and escalation pathways that include law enforcement, but also include prevention and awareness sides of getting the word out, response time, expectations, things like that. So those are my 3 calls to action. There's a lot more there, but I wanted to use my ICMEC board member time to focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. And now we go back to Europe and to Anne-Sophie Baudry. Anne-Sophie, I know Anne-Sophie from many years when she was representative in Europe from a company, was the beginning of Meta in Europe, and after Anne-Sophie was engaged in France in many activities around child protection and how to develop technology and connect with institutions in France, and now she's the AI ambassador in French. Can you make some comments, Anne-Sophie?
Yeah. Thank you, Professor, for your invitation. I'm really grateful to talk and discuss with you today for the Safer Internet Day about the most urgent challenges of our time is protecting children at the age of AI and in a fully connecting world. Technology growing fast, and social media and artificial intelligence have become powerful tools that shapes the lives of young people. With this opportunity, however, we need to be really aware about responsibility we need to have. And that's what we say today, that we need to be responsible and to protect children, to help them, to protect them when they use AI, because they all use AI for everyday life. They need to use AI for their emotional AI and emotional life, and they want to talk to chatbots that rather than talking to a human being. So they have different behavior when they talk to chatbots and when they talk to people. So we need to consider that children grow up with a new emotional life. They have many identities. They have identities and behavior for each platform they use. And that's why we need to build together so many tools and framework with the platform and public and private system. So in France, we are really committed to ensure that innovation keep children's safety, keep dignity and development. But we have difficulties to do that, so we have to work together globally with Telefono Azzurro, because Telefono Azzurro is a leader in Europe to set up panels like today and to set up a position paper for European platforms and governments. So when we can propose today, maybe we can propose many tools for children. I'm happy that this panel, we can talk together and try to make proposition. Maybe we can tag AI with a color code or something like that to explain to children what is fully AI, 100% AI content, and what is not. We also could try to explain children that they can talk to an emergency emotional chatbot for suicide prevention, because maybe they have a reflex to talk to a chatbot than to talk to a human being when they have difficulties to talk. Like we used to say the law of silence of children in the psychiatry side. So we need to set up many tools for them, and they can feel comfortable to talk. And they can be comfortable to talk to an emotional chatbot for emergency when they have something to tell and to alert. And we need to monitor this with the help of institution and cybersecurity. And also association like Telefono Azzurro. In France, the last months we used to talk about social media, and the former Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, wanted to pass a law to ban social media for the under 15 years old. But this is a solution of the age of social media. This is not a solution of AI. It's really good, but it's not enough. So they are really aware that it's not enough, but they try to move fast and to try to find solution at the global side with platforms and with the European discussion like we have today. To address this challenge, France has taken significant steps. The protection of minors online. The French government has implemented stricter regulation to ensure that digital platforms take responsibility to the safety of their youngest users, like the age declaration when they use a platform, the age verification measure. They try to take off rapidly harassment, cyberbullying, and all this stuff, and also when they have misinformation, exploitation. France has also supported legislation that empowers parents and educators to have tools, a guide to protect children and to explain them how to use AI. So this is really good to mix protection, forbidden access, and to mix with education, support parents to explain children how to use AI, and to explain also that to educators because they don't know how to react facing children using AI. So the educational ministry also in France decided to open a new role at this cabinet. It's a defense children rights, fundamental rights. So they really try to set up digital rights for children at the age of AI. So this is a good point for the French government. And artificial intelligence presents both promise and risk, and France committed to ensuring that AI system respects children's rights and well-being also. They include promoting ethical standards for AI and encouraging transparency in algorithms, and maybe a better discussion between platforms, cybersecurity, association, and users to react really rapidly. Furthermore, France works closely with European stakeholders and try to find partners in Europe, like Telefono Azzurro, to set up a position paper for child protection. So in conclusion, we can say that France wants to move fast and to be aware about AI impact on childhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. I'd like to make the second round with 2 minutes each of the speaker. I go back to the European Commission. We have now many countries in Europe that like to promote action to protect children. France, Spain, Greece, and outside Europe, UK is very active, and Australia, Canada. What do you think can be done more at the level of European Commission? What we, because for me, Digital Service Act is a wonderful instrument, but what we can do more?
Thank you. And just want to really thank you for all the speakers for their insight, and really congratulate also on the efforts that you do. It's really what matters the most, I think. But okay, what we can do. So clearly, it's interesting that when the DSA was negotiated, there was a real consensus about the risks that online services pose to society, including to children. And I think it was a good moment to adopt that legislation, and it's good to have a framework in place. Clearly, this has not yet solved all the issues, but also there is more debate now. One thing, luckily, stands still very clear, is that the protection of children online is really important. I think the initiatives, whether they are national or on the global level, will stay with us. The DSA is trying to be a baseline, a framework, but is obviously not trying to regulate everything. So I think there will need to be a way to find the compatibility with existing legislation and to build on top of it. But I think there's a lot that can be done already with the DSA. I mentioned already the Article 28 guidelines, and we have a big team working on looking at how this is being implemented, working closely also with the board, with all the national regulators, and we are, I think, really encourage also stakeholders to provide input on this work, looking at the guidelines that are already out there, and sharing with us and with national regulators experience they have with the platforms. And even within the specific topic of trusted flaggers, I think Travis mentioned how that maybe trusted flaggers can actually play a role. Experts that can also be trusted flaggers in the way systems of platforms are designed to use or tackle AI, generative AI, and its deployment. But it is written in the DSA. There is, of course, a very important part for very large services about risk assessment and risk mitigation. And it specifically mentions how, as a mitigation of risks, providers need to look at their content moderation processes, and they should initiate cooperation with trusted flaggers as well as another measure to mitigate certain risks. So on our end, what we want to do is really to make the most of the DSA, to have all the stakeholders in place, from trusted flaggers to out-of-court dispute settlement to all the digital services coordinators and their in each member state. And make use of the guidelines we have, and then of course we are working constantly also across the Commission and with the national governments, looking at more specific initiatives to tackle risks to children online.
Thank you. Thank you. And John.
Well, I'll echo some of those same comments, and I will say just that legislation is very, very important. And I hope to see that proposed EU legislation continuing to move forward and the creation of the EU Center. That will be game-changing when that is built. Of course, NECMEC has been in those early discussions, how to share data, what that would look like. But I defer back to that legislation because if you think back on my opening comments and how I mentioned that rapid growth in just a year's time, how we went from about a little over 500,000 reports of online enticement to more than 1.5 million last year. What changed? Well, what changed was the passage of the Report Act that required companies that now that they're aware of online enticement and child sex trafficking, they have to report that to NECMEC Cyber Tip Line. You know, that law had been in existence since the 90s that required companies that if they're aware of child sexual abuse material, they had to report to the Cyber Tip Line. This new addition and upgrade to the law is what drove those reporting numbers. Those incidents were always occurring. It was just being handled within the company. There was no reports that were being made. Law enforcement never had an opportunity to engage and to protect children and arrest offenders. So legislation is something we have to stay focused on for sure. It was lightly mentioned the Global Online Safety Regulators Network. You know, those folks, those online regulators are doing amazing work. You know, the work of, let's say, Julie Inman Grant being led by her, the level of, I would say, transparency that we've started to see with some of the activities within the companies and how it's raised the bar. I would love to see that network growing and expanding. And I know Ireland is a part of it. It'd be great to have someone, you know, all across Europe as a part of that network, asking the bold questions and helping to bring to light these issues, and again, the transparency that we all deserve around these issues. And then, you know, when we're talking about trusted flaggers and their activities, they are so important in helping survivors to get content removed, making sure that every one of those trusted flaggers has a proper escalation process in place. You know, for example, here at NECMEC, if there's a non-responsive hosting provider, we escalate that to the Department of Justice. We have a working relationship with the Child Exploitation and Obscenity section at DOJ. Every week, if we come across these non-responsive hosting providers, we're making them aware. They're the ones with the teeth that can actually go and enforce the laws and the fines. You know, NECMEC and many of the trusted flaggers, as it was mentioned earlier, we can't take down websites. We can't enforce those parts of the regulations, but we need to have those workflows in place and having the right people ready to go and enforce when in fact companies aren't being responsive to those notices.
Thank you. Ernie, you have some comments?
No, I mean, I agree completely. And I think John's absolutely right about the Global Safety Online Regulators Network. That's, as he points out, that's growing. There are just not enough countries doing that yet. And I think that will identify more offenders and enable law enforcement to follow up more aggressively. So I think he's absolutely right.
Thank you. Travis.
Yeah, no, I think I just want to double down on the cross-platform, cross-sector collaboration. I mean, Ernie and the others here have said things in the same vein, but, you know, having those standing multi-stakeholder forums like the one mentioned, the regulators, and, you know, helping law enforcement, researchers, platforms coordinate, develop shared taxonomies for CSAM, grooming behavior, other emerging threats. And, you know, I mean, one of the things at ICMEC we like too is the early warning systems. Like what can we do for those yellow flags? And, you know, especially with the new forms of AI-enabled exploitation, how can we promote more collaboration around that? So.
Thank you. And Sophie.
Yeah, more collaboration in real time could be great with lots of stakeholders like cybersecurity, NECMEC, hopefully, and Telefono, Azzurro, and all these experts around the table in real time to try to tackle child abuse and exploitation of child. And I think we need also to try to educate children, like the European regulation we know in gaming, like Peggy. I don't know if you know Peggy. We could do the same things for AI content, a color code on AI, and say this color code is important because this content is 100% AI. It's not real content, but AI content. To educate children, I think it could be great to promote this type of things and to open also, like I said, emergency chatbot for children who wants to talk about suicide prevention.
I like to thank all of you about your perfect time. We conclude this session that is very rich. I think in the future we have to build more and more connection between organizations and the state and company too, because I think we have to transform our ideas. And when we start, I was part of ICME for so many years, I don't remember. And for me, NECMEC was my point of reference in my activities in Italy, because Telefono start from this vision of NECMEC. And after we build a connection, and we know now that together we can do more. And Europe is doing so many important things, and in this moment I think Europe can play more important role than in the past, but at the different countries have to collaborate together. Trusted Flagger are a very important aspect of the system of Digital Service Act. We have to go ahead to see what we can do more. But I think that artificial intelligence creates to us a new challenge that we have to face together. Thank you a lot. And we pass now to the other section. And I like to invite here with me Antonio Caron, that is part of the Institute of Anthropology, the Pontifical Gregorian University, and Filippo Bagni, that represent Legal Officer and Digital Service Act Enforcement Team, European Commission. Is here as academic, as a person, very important person for the European Commission. And after we have with us in this section, we'll have Giuseppe Italiano, that will be connected from Bruxelles. He's professor of computer science and vice rector of AI and digital skills in LUIS, Guido Carli. Professor Lapenta sent us a message because he's in Netherlands and he was unable to join us, but he's professor of computer science of John Cabot University, of the Institute of Future and Innovation Studies. We have connected Raffaella Nicolazzi, Data Privacy and Consumer Protection Lead EMEA Global Affairs at OpenAI, and Francesco Pisani, that is a child psychiatrist, and Professor Child Psychiatrist at La Sapienza in Rome, and Nancy Santiago, Chief Executive Officer of Tribus Global. I'd like to start, the topic of this session is growing up with AI. How can chatbot or shaping childhood and adolescence? I'd like to start from Filippo.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Professor. I have some slides. Maybe it's a new thing today, I don't know. I just joined this morning. Okay, so I have some slides. Hi, everyone also online. Yes, I mean, the topic of this, I prepared some slides for today, but I mean, you spoke the whole day about the Digital Service Act. I'm working with the colleague Benze, who was in the previous panel. We're working together in Brussels, but I'm here as a DSA officer in Rome, because for general knowledge, every The DSA office in Brussels has a colleague in every capital of each of 27 member states. I mean, let's say I'm covering a colleague that is on maternity leave, so I will go back to Brussels at some point and join Rome spring, hopefully. That is very different from the Brussels one. I'm taking time for the slides. Okay, good. Do we have slides? And I have the pointer. Great. So, growing up with AI, making informed choices in a connected world. I have 10 minutes, so I'll try to keep it short, also given that it was a full day. Why? I'm gonna say some things regarding DSA, even if you spoke about the DSA the whole day, so I'll be super quick. Why do we need a digital regulation? You can see easily from this image, we have a life online, all of us. As you can see, and this is an image from 1 year ago, so it's not even updated. You can see there are like, I don't know, 10 million view minutes every minute on Instagram. Then we have like 22,000 prompts on ChatGPT, and so on. So the idea of the DSA and all the digital, let's say, regulation wave that comes also with the Digital Markets Act, the AI Act, Data Act, Data Governance Act of the first presidency of the von der Leyen, start with the idea that given that we have a life online, we have also rights and obligation online. And the idea, the central idea is that what is illegal offline should be illegal online too. Okay, so what is the DSA? You already said very quickly, it's a new, not really new, because in these days we are celebrating 2 years of the entry into force of the DSA, so 2024 February, regulating digital platforms. The aim is to build all together, also with trusted flaggers and, for example, researchers, users too, to create together a safer, more transparent and respectful space online. How? Putting some obligation on the other side of the table, so online platform and search engines. Who are the players to the DSA apply? As you can see, we have, okay, of course, the minimum level is intermediary service, then hosting service, online platform, and at the very end, the exclusive competence of the European Commission, and this is also something new compared to the past, the fact that there are a lot of regulation connected to digital, and the European Commission is putting at the center of the enforcement of these regulations, are very large online platform and search engines. What does it mean, online platform and search engine, that with over 45 million users a month, active users a month. Why 45 million? Because it's 10% of the European citizens. So we have here, as you can see, a risk-based approach, the same as the AI Act, basically. We have heard a lot about risk-based approach, speaking about the AI Act, but also the DSA is based on the same thing. Higher is the performance, let's say, higher are the risks and the obligation. So the higher risk are on very large online platform and the higher obligation too. Who are these online platforms? Here we have the social media, okay, the online platform, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. Then we have the online marketplaces, Booking, Zalando, Temu, and so on. Then we have app stores, such as Apple Store and Google. Search engine, Google and Bing, and the 4 platforms. Was just designated WhatsApp. So this is not updated. WhatsApp only the channel function, not the one-to-one interaction. Why? Because to be considered under DSA, it needs a dissemination to the public. The one-to-one chat is not dissemination to the public. So, which risks? Super fast. I try to align what is most relevant here, so the protection of minors. As you can see, this comes from Article 34 of the DSA that applies exactly to a very large online platform and search engine. The risk assessment that this platform has to send to the Commission, mandatory every year, has to take in consideration all the risks connected to their service in relation to these 4 main topics. One of these is negative effect for fundamental rights, including the right of the child. And, as you can see at the end, negative effect for minors. So every year we receive at least one risk assessment from all of that designated platforms and search engine, understanding how they're identifying, analyzing, and mitigating those risks. These are the two main articles, let's say, regarding the DSA. Speaking about protection of minors, we have Article 34 and 35. So again, as Benze was already saying in the previous panel, the identification of systemic risks and the mitigation measures. So the idea is that you have the information, you have to identify the risks and the related mitigation measures, okay? And of course, Article 28. Why is it important to underline Article 28? Because while Article 34 and 35 applies only to very large online platform search engine, Article 28 applies to all online platforms. What it provides, that all platform accessible to minors, so has a broad application, has to ensure a high level of privacy, security, and safety to minors. So as you can see, minors is really at the center of the DSA, together with other fundamental rights. What I would like to say, I mean, there are no, let's say, minors anymore in this room. There were before, and that was super interesting seeing their reaction this morning. But what is in our job a lot, as you can see from user perspective, is behind the three dots. If you use like LinkedIn, it's Instagram, or whatever, a lot of our job, so the transparency part of the DSA comes from the three dots option. So, for example, why I'm seeing this ad, and to decide if you want to see or not to see, again, a specific post or reel. Maybe you have found scrolling on Instagram, I don't want to see this, I want to see this, and so on, in Italian, because we are in Italy, maybe. So, we work a lot with two words, speaking about minors. Brain rot, I don't know if it's something you know what it's about. It's basically the fact that through this scrolling and through this addictive use of platforms and reels and so on, the user find a big difficulty in focusing. I don't know if you have this. I mean, I have the same feeling because I cannot read anymore 3 pages in a row. And when I was in high school, it was like 20, 30, in university, even more. Now, me too, I cannot read anything without being a bit tired at the end of 3 pages. So this is brain rot. And rabbit hole, another keyword. So the fact that through the recommender system, the algorithm provides content that are sensitive in a way that are provide emotion to the user. Why? Because more you interact, more you see a specific content, more the algorithm puts you the same kind of. What does it mean? That if I really like cats, I will have like 20 reels of cats. But if I watch, not because I like it, but just because I'm impressed, content of violent content or whatever, I will see in a row rabbit hole, because it comes from the idea of the hole, the rabbit, always this kind of content. And I'm sure you have experienced this too. So this is really effective to minors, to adults too, to be honest. So quickly, generative AI, because this panel was on AI. I've heard a lot of speaking about AI today. It's true that we have to speak about the AI Act as the first regulation regarding AI, not the technology, but the product, because the AI Act is a product regulation, so applies to AI system and AI models, while the DSA also applies to AI. I mean, AI is transversal, so every kind of regulation will apply to AI in general in the future. Why? Because these platforms and research engines are using, of course, AI tools, such as chatbots. I can name like My AI on Snapchat, Meta AI on Meta, Copilot for Bing, Instagram has its own Meta AI, Grok for X, and so on. Why are these AI tools should be considered? And careful, generative AI, that is not AI, it's a specific kind of AI. We speak up, I mean, the first one was speaking about AI was Turing in the 1950s, so 75 years ago. Now we're speaking about something different, it's generative AI. Because it can generate illegal or harmful content and also amplify the dissemination, as we have seen with the Grok case. So the chatbot under the DSA, you will find just twice word chatbot in the DSA in a specific recital. So the chatbot do not have their own qualification under the DSA, but you have to reduce them to the other qualification under the DSA. So meaning, or an independent service, online platform and search engine, or part of an independent service, okay? Related algorithmic system. Very quickly, some relevant enforcement actions regarding protection of minors and generative AI in the last years. One super recent, the one on Grok. And actually, this is, again, not updated because they were doing too much. Basically, 3 days ago, we also released preliminary findings on TikTok regarding addiction to minors, rabbit hole, and so on. So, what is relevant to say here is that there are guidelines for election and protection of minors with a specific section on generative AI. So take your time to read those parts. Also, we sent an RFI, request for information, to 6 VLOPs and 2 VLOSes, very large online platform, very large online search engine, asking on how they are mitigating and identifying risks under DSA in strictly connection with generative AI, and we did it 1 year ago. So that's why it's not something new under the DSA. And finally, super relevant, we just opened an investigation against X and Grok in particular, Grok AI functionalities within X regarding dissemination of illegal content, nudify. No, you have seen the nudifying thing, so you already know. So this is comes from 2 weeks ago. So it was the first open investigation on the DSA specifically on AI functionalities. These are the other open investigations under the DSA. You will find underlined the one related to minors. So the one about X, I just said it, Grok. One on TikTok, we just released the preliminary findings 3 days ago. And one also on Meta, protection of minors, addiction to addictive features such as infinite scrolling and so on. After 1 year, and this is my last slide, of DSA, this is what, 1 year, for the first year, second year, so this one has also to be updated, but let's say the numbers are almost this one, because this comes from 1 month ago. This is what we have done in 2 years of the DSA. As you can see, it's a lot. Of course, connecting to what you said before, we can do more, but what is now relevant is that the DSA and also other regulations, such as the AI Act and other one that will come, probably the Digital Fairness Act, will act together to provide a safer digital environment for minors and also for adults, to be honest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Presentation was very, very interesting and full of information and proposal. And now I pass this your presentation to Giuseppe Italiano. Giuseppe Italiano is professor in Lewis, and for the comments and a suggestion.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to Professor Caffo for the invitation. And sorry for not being there. I'm in Brussels for the whole week. So I hope you can hear me well. I'll try to give you my own personal perspective on growing up with AI. So when we talk about children and AI, I feel that the temptation is to choose between two extremes. On the one side, there is excitement, like AI will revolutionize education and creativity. On the other side, there is fear. AI will damage attention, cognition, and social skills. So when I talk to people about AI and education, these are the two positions, basically. I think both positions have some truths, but I believe also that both positions are incomplete. So I think the real question is not whether our children should grow up with AI, because they already are growing up with AI, and there is not much we can do about that, I think. The real question is, what kind of development are we supporting? And what kind of development might we be able to weaken unintentionally? So let me start with something which is very familiar, at least for me. I'm no longer able to remember phone numbers. I just know my phone number because people ask. But, because all the other phone numbers, including the phone number of my wife, are on my phone. So I don't remember them, and I lost these capabilities somehow. I'm not able to navigate a city without a GPS, because when I enter my car and I start driving, I put the GPS on. So I'm no longer able to navigate maps, right? So I'm able to do many other things, but somehow I lost those capabilities. I feel this is not a failure of intelligence. I think it's more cognitive offloading. In a sense, I'm delegating some mental tasks to some external tools, like the memory of my phone or my GPS. For adults like us, this is often efficient. But I think that for children, the story is completely different. If a child relies heavily on Gen AI to summarize text, generate explanations, solve problems, even articulate thoughts, then I'm afraid that some cognitive skills may simply never fully develop. The risk is not that children become less intelligent, but that certain mental muscles will be exercised less frequently. And I think this is very important during adolescence, because I'm not an expert, I'm a computer scientist, but I understand that during adolescence, there is a phase which is called synaptic pruning. Connections in our brain, which are frequently used, are strengthened, while those that are rarely used are eliminated. This is how our brain becomes more efficient. I mean, this is throughout a long time of adaptation. But it also means that what we do is really important. If reasoning, memory, problem solving are consistently delegated to AI tools, AI systems during this period of adolescence, then maybe some neural pathways may not be reinforced. This does not mean that AI is dangerous per se, but it means that timing, meaning adolescence, and intensity use of AI is very important. My experience as a university professor is that learning is not just about getting the correct answers. It is about struggling. If you go through effortful learning, this is kind of a desirable difficulty, then we get to deeper understanding, better retention, greatest resilience. AI tools, AI systems are designed to reduce friction. They make things easy for us. Again, for us adults, this might be beneficial. But for children, removing difficulty too early can reduce patience, tolerance for frustration, and intrinsic motivation. If everything becomes easy, smooth, optimized, instant, we might unintentionally weaken the capacity that children need to acquire in order to grow. So I think this also applies not only to cognition, but also to relationship, because childhood and adolescence are not only about learning, they're also about learning who we are in relationship with others. And, peers disagree, friends misunderstand us, adults say no. Chatbots do none of this. They're always available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They adapt to us. They never get tired. And for a vulnerable child, this can feel safe. But if AI becomes a conversational partner, we risk reducing exposure to social negotiation, conflict, emotional complexity, I think, which are very important features for growing, because they are not bugs of human interaction. I think they are features of our own developments. So let me try to be a bit more specific, and then I'll try to conclude. Many teenagers now turn to AI chatbots for mental health support or companionship. On the surface, this is safe, right? Because the AI bot doesn't judge, like parents, for instance. It's always there, parents are not. And it always agrees with the user, right? And parents do not always agree with children, right? But human relationships are supposed to be messy. They require negotiation, sacrifice, and the ability to handle disagreements. And AI chatbots are perfect mirrors. They gave us back what we want to hear. If a child or an adolescent primary social interaction is with a machine that never pushes back, he or she is not learning empathy. He or she is learning to live in an emotional echo chamber where his or her ego is never challenged. This simulated empathy is, maybe a safety net, but I think it's a cage that prevents children from growing into the social complexity of the real world. This is also an issue about epistemic trust. Chatbots always speak confidently. I never heard ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, or your favorite one, saying, I don't know. They rarely show uncertainty. And children are still learning how knowledge is produced, are learning that authorities like parents or school teachers or university professors can be wrong, and that they're learning that confidence does not mean truth. If we are not teaching actively critical thinking, I think that AI risks become an invisible authority. Very polite, very fluent, and very persuasive. I don't think AI will affect children, all children the same way. Children with attentive parents, informed teachers, supportive environments will likely use AI as a tool. But children that don't have this might use AI as a substitute for attention, for guidance, for learning. And this is, I think, a huge responsibility for parents, schools, policymakers, because they play a crucial role in this. So let me try to conclude with a clear message. I don't think AI is an enemy of childhood, but it's not good, it's not bad, but it's neither neutral, right? It's not a neutral toy. Children don't need less technology. I think they need better guidance. And this is our responsibility. Our responsibility is not to ban AI, because that will encourage actually children to use it more, but to ensure that they use AI to support development, not to replace it. To use AI as a tutor, not as a substitute, as a tool that empowers growth, not one that takes shortcuts and kind of guides you quickly to the objective. Something that makes you go farther, not faster, and not without effort. And especially makes you go where you cannot go on your own. And I think this is very important. If we can get this right, I think we can make growing with AI safer and maybe a little bit more enriching. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much again for having me here.
Thank you. Giuseppe is, what you say is very interesting for different reasons. But now I like to ask to Raffaele Nicolazzi what is her idea. She represents OpenAI in Europe, and she was in our meeting in Roma in November. And I know that OpenAI is discussing about this topic in the last months. You did two interesting discussion with Common Sense about this issue. I like to know from you, from a company vision, what you have in your mind for the future?
Absolutely. I hope you can hear me well from the room. Yes? Great. So first of all, thank you so much, Professor Caffo, for the opportunity to come back in Rome to share how OpenAI is thinking about youth protection. To your point, it also feels meaningful to me because our last conversation in Rome back in November, we are here not just to learn, but we also endorsed the Youth Protection Declaration that was presented to the Vatican. But I think since then, a lot has moved, right? In the technology, in the policy debate, and what families are asking all of us. So today, I really want to focus my remarks in three things. I want to quickly share a personal story. I second want to then share how we think about youth protection from model training to deployment. And then I want to offer a practical invitation for how we can keep improving this together. And my story is that when I was a teenager, I think I was very lucky because I had a father who was very open to technology. He didn't have many resources, but he would bring home the latest devices. And he would encourage us and me and my sister to explore and to learn, to play. And I think that this part hasn't changed nowadays, right? Parents today want their kids to benefit from the technology, and many of them want to be supportive guiders, to Professor Giuseppe's point. What has changed to me is the everything around it, right? 25 years ago, when I was a teenager, this kind of forums that we're having today, they were there if they existed at all, right? So where builders, academics, policymakers would sit together to talk seriously about youth protection. So the long tail of parents, they didn't have the same shared awareness of harms, patterns, and mitigations. And that was the kids of my family. My parents didn't know what was going on. And when I think about AI, I think we have the responsibility to do it differently this time, right? This generation, as has been said before, will be the first to grow up immersed in AI. And I think Filippo's made a very good point. Like, it's not just chatbots or Gen AI, it's AI embedded in devices, in assistants, in tools that are going to act on our behalf, right? Which is called the agents, and eventually even systems that will interact with each other. So I think to me, the question is not AI or not. The question should be how we do maximize then the learning, the creativity part, while really reducing the risks that are very real, right? Especially for teenagers who are still developing identity, judgment, and resilience. So how we are approaching this, right, from an OpenAI perspective. And when you think about the youth protection, I think the most important thing to note is that it should, and it is at OpenAI, this multi-layered approach that starts with how models are trained and evaluated. Then it continues in product design and defaults. And then, of course, it expands to partnerships and external experts and institutions. So to go deep into this multi-layered approach, let me start with this foundation, which is the first level, right? And to me, there is where the focus is the safety by design across the model lifecycle, right? Which really starts for us in pre-training, post-training, and deployment. And a very practical example of this is called model spec. So I'll be a bit technical here, but I think that's very important. So the model spec document is a public document that OpenAI pioneered a few years ago. And this document, it was to help us define how models should behave, include principles of safety, helpfulness, alignment, and responsible deployment. So it really guided both the training teams, but also the product decision teams across like many use cases, like from everyday interactions to even like high risk scenarios. So guidance to biosecurity risk and cybersecurity. And why I'm mentioning this, because recently we updated this model spec, and now there is specific under 18 principles embedded into this document, into how we approach a research and product deployment, on how then ChatGPT should behave in age-sensitive or high-stakes situations, including, for example, putting teens' safety first, even when it can conflict with other goals, because it's a Gen AI, as you know, and it can be very unpredictable sometimes. And the second thing is to promote real-world support. And I think that goes back to the points that I heard from my fellow colleagues here in the panel, which is to encourage offline relationships and trusted sources. So we published these principles because we do think we need feedback for this. Like, youth protection gets better when it's discussable, when it's testable, and it's improvable. And the two layers, the two parts of this first layer is first, age estimation. So we developed technology now that can estimate a user's age, so we can then apply teen safeguards automatically when we believe the account belongs to someone under 18. And the second thing is when we are unsure or when the age is unclear, we will apply this under 18 protection rather than assuming adulthood. Right. So this first layer to me is about one simple idea, which is to reduce the probability of harm upfront. Then it goes to the second layer, right? We're going a bit up, and it's about tools for families. Based on the feedback that we get, parents want to be able to tailor teens' experiences in a way that fits their families. And teens should also have this experience that supports healthy age-appropriate uses, to the points having mentioned earlier, right? So currently there are tools within chat that allows for account linking between parents, guardians, and children. It allows for privacy and memory controls. It allows for time-based controls like quiet hours. And one thing that we're exploring is interventions that are useful. And one very practical example of this is real-time safety alerts. So if there's a conversation of distress or self-harm in the platform, this safety alert goes straight to the parent, and it's designed to nudge them for real-world support and trusted resources, and not to replace human care, right? And we designed this very carefully because we didn't want to overreach, didn't want to over notify or accidentally cause harm by escalating, of course, the wrong moment. So I think in the second layer, the broader point is youth protection is also about guiding healthy usages, including when to step away and who to talk and what is trust help looks like. And then it goes to my third layer, which is empowering the ecosystem. And that's about collaboration, right? We don't pretend we can solve youth well-being alone. I mean, as we've been hearing before, we haven't been engaging with Gen AI for more than 3 years. And as we know, that's quite recent for research. Sometimes research takes 2 to more time to get it done. And we do acknowledge the challenge from researcher community, and we hear that a lot from them. And because of this, we know we can solve this alone, right? Not any company, not any industry. So the right answers require expertise that we're not necessarily going to have. So adolescent development, pediatrics, clinicians, educators, crisis response lines, all of them, we need to talk and know what's really going on. And one proof point of this is that we created something called Wellbeing Council. It's an expert council. It's a group of psychologists, clinicians, and human-computer interaction researchers. They're helping us define healthy interactions norms and then guide our product teams to these practices. And just last month in Europe, we launched a EMEA Youth and Wellbeing Grant, which is a 500K program to fund NGOs and researchers who are closest to these issues. So this is to fund research in impact and cognitive ability, to support helpline, suicide lines that are doing great work in the front line on all of this that's going on around AI chatbots. So to me, that's pretty much about a shift from concern to capability, right? So it's funding the evidence, it's being close to where interventions are happening, and this shared learning that can improve both the product and the policy. So I think just to finalize my point here, I think nobody thinks that we are solving youth protection. I think everybody should know that that's definitely a journey. That means, at least for us, that we listen first and we like to keep these channels open. We iterate safeguards and risk evolve, right? I mean, things that were challenged 2 years ago might be way less the problem today, but new problems are going to emerge. And where we can, we share what's being learned with the entire ecosystem. So it's just not one company, right? And because if you get this right, I think the payoff is enormous, is young people using AI to learn better, to create more and access knowledge safely. And I think with the confidence that parents, families, and the trust of society. So those are my general remarks for the moment. Thank you so much, Professor Caffo.
Thank you a lot. I think that a company as OpenAI has a vision. The origin was a non-profit company. I know that you're moving in another structure, but I think in any case that all the area of artificial intelligence company are an interesting area in which we have discussed how the regulatory system can work, and we have to find a way in which we have to collaborate together in different way. And this is what in California you did in California. I thank your total presence in Rome. The signature that you did in Rome was an important commitment in this process. And now I like to ask to Antonio Caron that represent in some way to if represent Gregorian, to make some comments about the history, the work that he is doing with Hans Zollner, that was part of our meeting in November, to see what he think about.
Thank you for the invitation. First of all, talking about children and adolescents who are growing up today with AI means recognizing this the change that we listened before. The digital environment is no longer just a tool, but also a space where life happens, a place for learning, for interaction, and for building identity. Pope Leo, from the beginning of his pontificate, has underlined the impact that AI is having in our world, and as Pope Francis had already done, he insists that the human person must always be at the center, and that all technological development must be guided by ethical principles that always seek to respect and dignify the human being. Pope Leo has also continued Pope Francis' insistence on warning about the misuse of AI. Today we need to go deeper into algorithms. We must dialogue with the world about what truly makes us human, and we must never forget that the human being needs to cultivate interior life in order to develop fully. From our perspective of the Institute of Anthropology, which has been committed for years to the prevention of abuse and the creation of safe environments, this reality challenges us directly. Every day we see how AI influences behavior, shapes experiences, and contributes to the way young people understand themselves and relate to others. And all of this can be for good or for bad. The central question is not whether AI should be present in the life of minors. The fact is that it already is, but how it is present and under what conditions it supports truly human growth, keeping the person at the center and taking into account all dimensions: emotional, relational, cognitive, physical, and the will. For this reason, in order to integrate AI in our lives today, and especially into the lives of the children and young people, we must promote education based on 3 dimensions: teaching for AI, which means developing critical and digital skills; second, teaching about AI, which means understanding it and knowing how to apply it; and third, teaching with AI, which means integrating it as a tool to improve processes and create resources. Today, AI is a new educational environment, and from an anthropological point of view, this is very important. Every environment educates. It shapes how we think, how we relate to others, how we deal with frustration, and how we make decisions. AI, therefore, does not only support education, it becomes part of the educational ecosystem. We have real opportunities, we have concrete risks, and from a prevention perspective, we must remember that vulnerability does not come only from explicit abuse, but also from contexts that slowly weaken autonomy, the sense of limits, and the ability to ask real and responsible adults for help. One of the key pillars of our work at the Institute is the importance of relationship AI can simulate listening, empathy, and understanding, but it's not a full relationship. It has no moral responsibility, does not truly seek the good of the person, and it cannot take real responsibility for another. For children and teenagers who are still building their identity and emotional life, this difference is crucial. When AI becomes a substitute and not a support for human relationship, in the family, in education, there is a risk of silent loneliness. Young people always accompany, but deeply alone. And prevention is never limited to technical or control measures. It is always an integral education of the person. And applied to AI, prevention means educating for critical thinking, digital discernment, the values of limits, and responsible use of technology. And safe environments do not appear spontaneously. They are always the result of competent, present, and responsible adults in the life of the minors. Parents, educators, formators, and institutions are called not to delegate education to technology, not to demonize the technology, but to accompany, guide, and remain involved. True digital safety is not built only with filters, controls, or regulations, but through meaningful relationships, attentive listening, and shared educational responsibility. In conclusion, growing up with AI creates new challenges, but it does not change our fundamental mission. At the center, there always remains the human person, their dignity, freedom, vulnerability, and capacity for authentic relationship. And within the context of this day, this Safer Internet Day, our common commitment can be expressed in this way: to promote digital environments that are not only safe, but that truly help children and adolescents become free, responsible persons capable of authentic relationships. Only in this way can choices in a connected world become truly conscious choices. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, I think after your speech, I like to ask to Nancy Santiago to intervene. Nancy represents Tribus Global and many other things. She's a very active person in this field. Nancy, to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Caffo, and thank you to all the panelists that have spoken today. I've learned so much. I think, Anne-Sophie and Giuseppe, you will hear things reflected that you said. But I'm Nancy Santiago, and I work at Tribus Global. Tribus Global works at the intersection of youth development, major cultural shifts in the world, and global mental health issues. It's a very interesting time for us, to say the least. I worked for both President Obama in the Department of Education and President Biden in the Office of the Surgeon General, which is our nation's top doctor. And at the time when I came back into government, my goal was really to work on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. What I was asked was, what do you see coming next? And the first thing I mentioned, because I am a trained therapist, was the mental health issue that was about to follow the pandemic. And so sure enough, we put together an advisory under then President Biden. It was a Surgeon General's advisory on protecting youth mental health. And if you understand those advisories in the United States, we use them as a convening tool. It forces Congress to address an issue. We're raising an alarm bell, and we're forcing conversations about investments that are needed in that particular issue. So I think with that framing, I want to be able to give you an idea of how my remarks are going to go, and I will try to keep them as concise as possible. But I want to talk about, out of the birth of that advisory on protecting youth mental health, I want to talk about what we learned from young people around mental health directly, from young people around the country. I want to be able to, and this was all US domestic. I want to talk about the importance of understanding generational cohorts and the psychology and predictive patterns that emerge from similar life experiences, in this case, Generation Alpha, and some of the younger members of Generation Z. It's very important to think about them holistically in that way as patterns do emerge. And finally, I'm going to explain how Tribus Global is applying what we've learned out of our work with the Surgeon General's office and now kind of since 2020, what we've learned for young people, that what they need to feel safe. And safety is an important part of this conversation. It's part of their psyche and what's missing in their world. And we'll talk about that as I talk about the generational cohort itself. But we also need to understand what they want to engage with, because we can build all the wonderful tools and design AI to do what we think it needs to do. But if young people do not engage with it in that way, we will continue to see gaps. So I think the framing is important. So those are my three things: what we've learned from young people, how important it is to pay attention to the generational cohort and their similar characteristics, and finally, what we're doing on our end around research. It's important for framing purposes. AI is not inherently harmful. Design choices determine impact, right? Design choices. And the world will not be, Mo Gaudet said this recently, that it's not the people that know the most about AI that will determine the future. It's about those who care the most about how it's used. And I think that's the group of people we have in this room today. AI is not inherently harmful. Children are forming emotional attachments to systems that were built for engagement. That's the problem we need to solve for. These systems were built for engagement and for information and all those things, but children are building an emotional attachment to it, and that's what we need to be paying attention to. And regulation has just not caught up with the developmental realities that we're facing. So we know all the stats. We heard Megan speak this morning about some of those in a very personal way. In the Surgeon General's office, the advisory was ringing the alarm bell about the soaring suicide rates. In the US, 1 out of every 6 high school students had an active suicide plan. Not just suicidal ideation, but a plan. It's a very different dynamic. We know that anxiety was appearing at younger ages in higher numbers. We also know that approximately 50% of all lifetime mental health issues start to display themselves by age 14. So we knew to zero in on youth mental health very particularly. And then what we learned from young people as we took the advisory out on the road is that young people were very clear to us that they are not a monolithic grouping. We talk about children and adolescents broadly. And it's important because that's the focus of our work. But there are differences, not just in age and in developmental places, but in cohorts and how they see each other and how they interact. It's important to pay attention to the patterns that emerge in those cohorts, because those characteristics can give us clues as to why young people are reacting and interacting the way they are with the technology, but also what we need to do to build something different that works for them. So let's talk really briefly about the generational cohorts. And I think I'm talking to folks who know this. You work with young people, but I think it's worth emphasizing. When we talk about Generation Z, that's approximately 1997 to about 2010, maybe some people say 2011. Generation Alpha, those are born between 2010, 11 to about 2025, and the numbers will change depending on who you speak with. But those two generations together constitute over 47% of the global population. So we should be looking at the characteristics specific to these generations, but even more importantly, understanding that these two generations were impacted by once-in-a-lifetime situations that have changed the way they think about everything from technology to their online behaviors. And I'll jokingly say this, and it'll probably be the only time you hear Bad Bunny and the Pope brought up in the same conversation, but there are two people out there leading that understand the importance of this generation and are learning very strategically to engage with these generations in the way that most impacts them. From the raves at the basilicas to Bad Bunny's residency and Super Bowl halftime show, they understand that this generation of young people are longing for a sense of community because it was ruptured. Their social networks were ruptured during the pandemic. They're looking for a sense of community. They're looking for authenticity. They're looking for connection. So even though they're technologically more connected, they are less social in many ways. The isolation grows. So understanding how those subgroups work and the genius that I'm seeing between the Vatican's approach and like a Bad Bunny's approach to reaching them is a lesson for all of us in how we need to be engaging and using AI, not just to solve the problems, but to truly engage young people in the design of those solutions. So Gen Alpha is the first generation to be fully immersed, truly AI natives. They are the most racially and culturally diverse cohort in the world right now. For the younger generation Z and for all of Gen Alpha, the pandemic caused a seismic shift in their online behaviors, right? So the continued use of social media and AI is because their feelings of safety, predictability, and quite honestly, control over their world, those things that went away with the pandemic and the shutdowns have never rebounded. So the pandemic forced them inside. It forced their schooling to be online. It ruptured their social networks and friendships. There was grief and loss for those who lost people. They were living now potentially online before they should have been because it was required by the moment, but they are watching life stream in front of them live. For those of us that followed things that were happening, like the first bombing in Ukraine, happened live and online. Videos were online immediately. Babies who wouldn't have normally been online are now online when this is happening. There's a racial reckoning in the United States in the summer of 2020, the murder of a man by a police officer. Children saw that. Why? Because they are online now. So think about everything that they're seeing and experiencing while not having the social networks that they normally would have processed these things with. So young Gen Z and Gen Alpha are in search of safety and predictability and communities to belong to. And as I was talking to two young people who work at Twitch, they build communities in Twitch. True, this is what their job is. They're in their 20s. They have declared 2026 the year of analog because kids want to go back to vinyl records, movie theaters, the things that we took for granted, they're looking for. So it's a very interesting time to be a young person now. But this search for community and belonging and almost a nostalgia for what they consider to be wholesome and good has landed them in a snare that is unfettered access to AI and social media. So from an engagement perspective, both of these generations are very, very highly focused on mental health, and they identify with these kind of mental health crises that are happening in the world. They are focused on authenticity. They are very focused on identity and meaning. Very different characteristics that are driving them. They treat digital platforms as primary arenas, not a side channel. We still treat them as side channels. And I say we because I'm a Gen Xer and old. But the truth is that young people don't see it that way. It's part of their everyday landscape. They engage when messages feel participatory. The raves at basilicas, very participatory, right? Very values driven. They are tech immersed, highly visual, they're auditory learners. They are fluent in non-traditional communication mechanisms. If you've ever picked up a preteen or a teenager's phone, they can have entire conversations in what I call new hieroglyphics, which is texting, just emojis.
Thank you.
Right? And so I need folks to understand that we're moving in that direction as we design AI that meets their needs.
Thank you, thank you, Nancy, about your passionate and very special speech. We have another speech in this area of mental health. It's Francesco Pisani, child psychiatrist from Sapienza of Rome. And after I asked to Ernie to prepare a short final comments to this very interesting panel.
Thank you, Ernesto, for inviting me to this interesting, very, very high-quality meeting about this. Yes, just a general comment and a final comment, because I have a few people here with a very tired expression, so most has already said, but I started with a normal concept. We say that technology is not neutral, as already said here. And then if we have another concept from Vygotsky said that any tools you put in the growth process influences cognitive and emotional development. So this is very important, because we have to know this one. We are not trying to stop innovation, but we need to a governance on this process. If we go back on the Industrial Revolution, it was a development without any pain. No, a lot of people died there. We are in the middle of another industrial revolution. So something has already said, but we have kids, children, adolescents that are not in the center of our interest, especially in the families. Parents are worried about taxes, about work, about jobs, so they become confident with the chatbots, no? And the chatbots guarantees the availability 24 hours on 7. There is a anonymity. There is no judgment. You can tell them whatever you like, even during the night when their loneliness is higher. You can say whatever, and they have because they indulge you, no? They don't judge. They don't put a stigma on you, and it can be a bridge when you have some mild anxiety disorder or depression mood. It can be a bridge because it's not easy to afford to get or to go in mental health services because there is a long queue. No? The list is very, very. But the problem is that they are not used to give you a solution. They are made to emulate empathy, but they are not the feelings of empathy. They are built to keep you in front of the screen as long as possible. They don't give you a solution. We have, I put the name here, this adolescent of 14 years of age, Seguela Cesar, who suicided after months of talking to a chatbot, but the chatbot wasn't able to understand the critical moment he was living at that time. So they are not built for this process. So the problem here, we have this one. I don't want to stop or to say, no, innovation, but as already has been in a very elegant way said, we have teaching for, teaching with, but teaching about AI in our school. Are we ready to afford this kind of? I don't think so. There are no experts on this field. No, anytime there is psychologists, neuropsychiatrists, but I'm expert because I can tell you that tomorrow morning the cappuccino is similar, or worse than the cappuccino that I had this morning. But my smartphone tomorrow morning will be different than my smart working, or my smart telephone, or my mobile phone. How it works today is different the way it works tomorrow. So there is no expert in this field. We can have a framework. We can say something in order to afford something because we are expert about cognitive and emotional development, but we are not expert where we can go with chatbots and artificial intelligence. So we have to keep alarm much more than worries about privacy or something else. I'm worried because I'm like at the end of the river, when the river goes to the sea. When people comes to me, the games are over, okay? As there's plenty of adolescents that are waiting to come to my clinic because, it's one of the biggest in Italy. So it's time, it's challenging, but it's time to make a revolution in the idea. He has already said, human being has to be the center. And Papa Leo, I agree with your talk, and then it should be the center even in this revolutionary technology. So technology is non-neutral, has an influence on our emotional and our cognitive development, as I said, but we cannot try to stop because we are losing since the beginning, but we are obliged to make some frameworks, cultural, ethical guidelines in order to govern this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, Francesco. And I ask Ernie to make some comments, and we will conclude the session.
Well, Ernesto, let me say this was an extraordinary panel, and I think it captured the essence of the challenge that we face today. Filippo, for the European Commission, highlighted that there are tools in place to the Digital Services Act. Article 28 addressing the privacy, safety, and security of minors. Giuseppe Italiano grabbed my attention with his point that we don't need less technology, we need more guidance. That the scope of the challenge, the loss, as he described it, loss of cognitive skills, the effect on decision-making that young people are making is really terrifying. We heard from Antonio Caron about the leadership of the Institute of Psychology at Pontifical Gregorian and the need for safeguarding, for building in these kinds of safeguarding tools that are not there yet. I was really moved by Nancy Santiago's a couple of the points that she made, that 1 in 6 high school students in this era of companion chatbots already have a suicide plan, and that mental health issues emerge in kids by the age of 14. That's not being understood and addressed yet. And the other point she made that grabbed my attention was that 47% of the global population are Gen Z or Gen Alpha. And this is a population that was dramatically impacted by the COVID pandemic, and they're searching for safety, predictability, community, belonging. I was touched by the report from OpenAI and its commitment to age estimation. There's got to be, whether that's good enough, we'll see. But there's got to be a process in place for identifying those at greatest risk of those kinds of vulnerabilities that other speakers have identified. But I'm impressed by the development of real-time safety alerts, by the creation of a well-being council, by looking at the basic principles of how under 18s are being addressed. I mean, that needs to be the beginning of a dialogue across social media and across the use of AI. And, finally, I was moved by Professor Pisani and his point about the human being being in the center of the dialogue. That the need to address and impact the threat and the risks that these tools and platforms are providing, and the lack of adequate attention in the law, in policy, in mental health and physical health practice. So let me say generally, I'm sure I didn't do justice to any of you, but I think it was an extraordinary discussion and one that sets the basis for ongoing dialogue to do a lot more. So thanks to all of you for being a part of this.
Thank you, Ernie, and for your comments. And one important final conclusion is that we have to work together for the future. One important moment will be the conference in June, in which you are central part of the meeting in the World Congress that we organize in Rome from the 8th to the 11th of June, in which we like to share ideas between academy, institution, and company together, as we did in November. And I think this is the occasion to go forward. And I think in this case, Europe plays a crucial role, but too, I think, in many other parts of the world, we are thinking that children have to be at the center of this incredible revolution, the digital and the AI revolution, in which we have the children at the center. Thank you, all of you, and see you very soon.